All right. What is it? Quiet on the set. Quiet on the set. Hi, everyone. I can't hang on.
You're laughing too much about your Quiet on the Set 42nd Street reference. Jail.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Lights, Camera, Accolade. Today, we are going to be discussing the 14th year of the Academy Awards, in which we still have 10 full movies to discuss. So strap in. It's going to be another long episode, but it'll be worth it. You're going to learn so much and get to know which movies to watch and which movies to skip, which this year might be a little bit unbalanced in that direction. My name is Sarah.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Abby.
And just to set the scene a bit, a reminder that these movies were released in 1941. So just going over a bit of what was happening that year, it mostly is an escalation from last year. You know, World War II is continuing to kick into overdrive. So in January, Franklin Roosevelt was sworn into an unprecedented third term, hopefully the only president who has or will ever do that.
Just got really
I
sweaty.
know. The U.S. did start sending weapons and supplies early in the year to Britain and other allies. So while the U.S. was increasing its wartime factory work and drafting people for service to start training, they hadn't officially entered the war yet, but they were already starting to very clearly pick sides in this, right? In the summer was when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, which is pretty much the beginning of the deadliest front of the war. Yeah. So at that point in the summer, it's like, well, any hope that the war is going to be short-lived is gone by that point.
That's a great point, because there was oftentimes this feeling that you could appease Hitler for a long time.
Right.
And so it got to that point, as you're saying, once that Rubicon was crossed, to use a too oft used phrase, that everybody was off to the races.
Mm-hmm. And in that same summer, tensions were starting to rise in the Pacific too, because as we know, Japan had already allied with the Axis powers. So the U.S. imposed oil and trade embargoes, because again, hadn't officially joined the war, but they were picking sides. And that increased tensions, negotiations didn't go anywhere. So back to that wartime industrial production, it's in full swing at this point. That actually resulted in labor shortages, which exposed longstanding racial inequalities in those systems, right? So I think a lot of this gets overshadowed by the war effort and the things going on globally with the war. But I do want to at least highlight during this time in the country, this is a time where like unions and civil rights leaders, most notably A. Philip Randolph, were really pressuring the federal government to end discriminatory hiring in the defense industries. They coordinated what would have been a large march on Washington in 1941, but FDR, as a result, issued an executive order that actually banned racial discrimination, specifically in defense hiring and like government jobs, which resulted in Fair Employment Practices Committee to continue like investigating discrimination and address that. So this kind of to our note from last time, right? It sucks that a lot of this happens because we're gearing up for war and therefore we're like making these changes versus just, you know, for the moral and ethical reasons. Right. But it is at least something. And then, of course, in December, so end of the year, post any of these movies releasing, that was when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and America officially entered the war. So next year, we're probably going to see a lot more overt wartime stuff, either in the history with the context or the movies. I'm not really sure. I haven't looked at what movies come out that year.
Sure.
But that's just a little bit of the history. But I do want to touch on the creative side, too, because I just have to give a shout out to Woody Guthrie, who is kind of the soundtrack of the Depression leading into the war years. So he sang a lot about the Dust Bowl and then continued transitioning into a lot of like anti-fascist, anti-racist, pro-labor songs. Side note, he actually released a 2-part retelling of The Grapes of Wrath, which I listened to while I was researching. And they're actually really great. It's just pretty much the full story put to Woody Guthrie song. But I was like, honestly, now I kind of want to go back and rewatch The Grapes of Wrath.
That movie.
And then side note on the side note, though. Later, like looking ahead in the 50s, just fun trivia fact, he wrote a song protesting racist housing practices of his landlord. The title is Old Man Trump, and it's literally about Donald Trump's dad, Fred Trump. So
Cool. Great.
we just continue all of these things.
Yeah, you gotta love
so just needed to really give him a shout
rugged
out.
individualists, capitalists, and real estate barons that were so good at building buildings with public funds and public subsidies. Yeah.
Yep. And then just one more music shout out, repopularized by Fallout, the song I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots. That came out this year too, which is also just a good listen. So 1941, you're seeing a big shift in culture where art, entertainment, media, they're all kind of tools at this point now of like morale, persuasion, identity.
True.
We'll see that in some of the movies this year, which I think we'll be able to talk about more in depth as we get started.
What an important point to hit on about the ubiquitousness of the war as a major theme right now, because that, I think, parallels a lot of the movies this year, actually, or at least several that come to mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the movies that we are going to talk about imminently is... maybe I'll save it for once we actually start talking about it. But I had a question about the movie that kind of answers that question.
Interesting.
Okay. I'm excited to hear the question. We're doing non-linear answers here.
Ooh, that really ties into Citizen Kane too. So, we're really hoping.
I know. Oh my goodness. Our introduction's on point, even when they take 30 minutes to get there.
All right. Are we ready to start talking about movies?
Yes, I'm ready. So ready.
All right. So our first movie is Sergeant York, which is a biopic about Alvin C. York, one of the most decorated American soldiers from World War I. Starring Gary Cooper as the titular York, we're treated to a folksy 2 hours in which York repeatedly fails to have any convictions whatsoever, though the film seems wholly unaware of this. He gives up being a violent drunkard for being a man of the Lord. He gives up being a peaceful, conscientious objector in the World War I trenches to become a German-killing super soldier. And finally, he gives up his desire to refuse to be rewarded for his heroism by accepting a farm bought for him by the state. I was going to close this with a further cutting remark, but I really wanted to leave the floor open for y'all. So go forth.
Well, thank you for that. But that is a pretty consistent theme that I'm now realizing. He does, shall we say, to put it charitably, compromise his values repeatedly throughout this movie. Wow. Sarah, what did you think? Because I have a lot of thoughts about Sergeant York.
I don't even know where to start with this other than to just share with y'all that I have complained about the first hour and a half of this movie and the movie in general, but especially the first hour and a half to people at work, to my partner, to like people who don't know anything about film. And I'm just like, let me tell you about this movie that I watched recently because I need to share this suffering. The pacing was just so brutal. As I told you guys, I shared with you, it took me 4 or 5 attempts because I kept falling asleep every 15 minutes.
Well, it's the first 5 scenes of the movie are the same scene over and over again.
It's so frustrating to watch. And I think the point of it is really to show this slice of life Americana so you know where he comes from. But you could have done that in 15 minutes because later when he joins the military and he's in training, you get a lot of that like fish out of water. And I think it works there. You didn't need an hour and a half of like, we're going to shooting and we're going to doing all this. And then we're, like, I could also, his accent was terrible. My accent was terrible doing that, but his wasn't much better in the movie. That's all I'm going to say there. All right. Yeah. Also, the age gap between the actress who plays his future wife and Gary Cooper. I don't know if that was reflecting the actual age gap or anything between Alvin York and his wife, Gracie, but it was something like almost a 30-year age gap. Jeez. And I think the actress was only like 17 or something.
Cool.
I think it was like a 24-year age gap. So I'm like, we haven't really seen that in Hollywood that egregiously up to this point. So I don't think it's something where it's like, oh, the old established actor being paired with like a young co-star as much as possible. I have to imagine that it is like she was young and he was not so young, potentially.
I don't know.
Or maybe he was actually young and they just wanted Gary Cooper to be in the lead role.
It's hard because
really
in this era, when men hit like 25, they just look the same. They age very quickly. So I couldn't tell you how old Gary Cooper is. He just looks like Gary Cooper to me.
Yeah, I think he was in his like early 40s, I believe.
Wow.
I think I told someone that this movie belonged in a 2-for-1 Walmart DVD. I originally had paired it with Cavalcade, and it was going to be the less good movie in the 2-for-1 pack. But I think actually there's another movie from this year that it could be paired with for like really great 1941 Oscars movie 2-for-1 pack at Walmart that you should actually be left at the bottom of the bin. The only thing that I think is compelling about this movie in terms of asking questions, so getting to my question, is in terms of war dramas and kind of the American perception of World War II, there's a real sense of like American exceptionalism. We went over there and we won the war.
Sure.
And you see tinges of that in this movie already, where so many of the war dramas that we've watched prior to this, even like Lives of the Bengal Lancer, has a kind of pathos and suffering in it. And despite the fact that a chunk of this movie is him conscientiously objecting to like doing violence, there's a real lack of that. Anytime he shoots a German, it is as tragic as him shooting
a video game.
Right. Well, quite literally. It's a video game. So it's really fascinating to me that some of that easy violence, American heroism kind of that really became popularized during World War One or post World War One, especially like post World War One. It's a huge thing, especially with like gentlemen's venture magazines and that kind of thing. It's fascinating to me that that ethos is already springing up here before the United States has even officially entered the war. It's kind of part of that propaganda churn machine of, to your point, where they're starting to draft people and starting to train people. Like that really seems to be a bedrock of how we got involved in the war, which is interesting.
That's really interesting to me because like you're totally right about the easy violence, and it's treated without any kind of heaviness that we've seen in other movies. Obviously, All Quiet on the Western Front being this same war, World War I. But the way that I viewed the propaganda type elements of this in terms of when it came out was obviously this is centered around a man who was from Tennessee, Kentucky?
Yes, Tennessee.
One of the Tennessee? Okay, from Tennessee, small town, so far from any kind of big wars brewing in Europe. And yet he went on to be one of the most important soldiers from the American side in the war. So it's kind of like this message of even though these things feel far away, you, an American, whether small town or big town, can be the hero that makes the difference. Exactly. And I think that probably would go a long way in making it feel like you have a part to play to do something big here. Also did find out it was the highest grossing film of 1941. So
that's crazy.
Absolutely completely wild to me.
Audiences will put up with anything.
Yeah. But I do think that that probably speaks to how much that sort of meaning and the importance of your ability to make a difference in a war and stuff, and building up that wartime heroism again was speaking to audiences at that time, even though years later, it's just like, you watch it and it is a completely different experience than what they were going on. I also have to mention, this man read 2 books and built his whole life on them. Like this just, I don't know. Yeah, the timing of the movie, I think, is what is part of what's interesting about this movie. And I do think there's like a framework of interest in that man's life where he was a conscientious objector, went to war and decided that he had to kill people to save people. Yeah. You know, like there's an interesting movie in there, but it's just, this wasn't it.
It's not on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying and connecting it to the time period and what, you know, it's like I always say, it's not necessarily a smoke-filled room where these decisions are made, but there's this kind of organic process whereby just for the sake of profit-seeking, Hollywood and filmmakers start to predict the directions that the culture and geopolitics are headed in. And if you think about what the young male American population was compelled to do very shortly after this, start charging headlong into active gunfire on beaches. This is the type of movie that you would want to gas them up on right before that, because just as you say, this is an everyman from any small town in America. And what struck me is it's kind of along with a running theme that I keep bringing up on the show about the way the nation state of the United States in a modern sense is being formulated. This is another example of of presenting a framework for a jackass idiot from Bumblefuck to view themselves as part of this new national project. They're having to compromise their religious values. They're having to risk their relationships with their families and their community. But ultimately, if you are loyal and you make those sacrifices and you survive and God is on your side, you will be rewarded with a house, which was very much the vibe at the end of World War II. So it does make me wonder,
true.
How much of that is wrapped in with the New Deal, citizenship, and these communities all across the country now being connected via highways and trade networks to this new national project. And part of that was our young male population involving themselves in killing on a mass scale in Europe. So this movie, I think, helped grease the wheels for that process.
It's crazy, the state of inflation, that you used to be able to go fight in a war and get a house, and now you fight in a war and you get a college education and that's it.
Which those degrees are about to be wiped out by AI. So
right. To your point about forming that American identity, which I think is happening a lot in these years that we're in right now. The fact that it was literally the book recommendation of here are all of these famous men who built America, read about them so that you can feel patriotic and then choose to join in the war effort, I think combines both of those things pretty nicely, right? It's like in realizing what it means to be a strong, heroic American, he goes on to become a strong, heroic American. So yeah, this is like the Anthony adverse of this year, except just bad all around, like not even fun, just bad,
boring to watch.
Just boring to watch. It takes itself very seriously. It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, pretty much like every category that it could be nominated in.
I will say the whole sequence where they give him the shore leave because he's such a good shot that they want, he's having all these doubts. He's a conscientious objector.
He has to think about it.
And giving him a little extra benefit that they wouldn't give all the other guys in the military. They allow him to go on shore leave and kind of think about the Bible and see if he can rationalize, making these lifestyle changes for his country. And that whole sequence of him, he's walking up the mountain with the dog. He's overlooking the valley. There's this soaring music. He's discussing, the founding fathers. It's very, very, like I said, if you're an idiot, that type of imagery and sounds, they used to build cathedrals for peasants in the Middle Ages. And if you got to go into a cathedral a couple times in your life, you'd be so overwhelmed by the sensory experience of that because all you do is look at shit and chickens all day. And here you are walking into this vaulting ceilings, this music playing, the light playing off things. So the effect of that, just on an aesthetic level, had to have been really powerful. This is, to me, almost like the 20th century version of that. Shuffling the peasants off the fields, bringing them into the cathedral, the modern day version of that, our media and culture, and programming them. This is the socioeconomic system and the state that you exist to serve. So really powerful in that way. But just also, and no offense to Christians out there, but it is funny how easily you can use that text to make an argument for whatever the fuck you want to.
Yeah, the wind blows onto the give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and he's like, "You're right. Yes. I should kill for America."
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know how much more there is to say about Sergeant York.
I think that's it.
We maybe gave this movie more words than it really warranted, but that's okay. All right, are we ready to go on to our next movie?
Yes.
All right. Blossoms in the Dust is a biopic starring Greer Garson as Edna Gladney, a woman who helped rehome orphans and press for the removal of the word illegitimate from Texas birth certificates. A practice so dehumanizing that it's surprising that the Texas government of today isn't trying to bring it back. The story follows Edna as she marries, suffers a series of tragedies, both personal and financial, starts various childcare initiatives, and finally an orphanage. Edna ultimately finds herself in a battle both against the state of Texas and her own heart when she has to face giving up her favoriteest little orphan to a real home.
Oh, yeah. How did you ladies feel about this one? I'd be very curious to get your take first with some of the gender dynamics.
The tone of this movie is crazy. Like,
yeah.
Literally, her adopted sister kills herself because her parentage, the fact that she is an illegitimate child, is discovered by her fiance's parents and they forbid the marriage. So she literally, one scene, she kills herself. And in the next scene, we cut to wedding flowers and Edna having a great time. And this is fairly consistent. Like, we will cut straight from some unspeakable tragedy to everything's cool and fine. Or it's like, everything's not fine, but we're going to let it slide off like water off the back of a duck. And it's just, if you're being generous, I think that you can say like maybe Edna, the character as written, is coping with a positive attitude, but it doesn't read.
Yeah, it doesn't read on the screen. I think with editing and music, they could have done a lot more to smooth those things out, because to your point with those really harsh transitions, the scene where her biological son dies in an accident, the music before that scene is happy childhood music. Well, it's like, oh, what toy do you want to bring? And that music doesn't change when they come back in with the rain and the stuffed animal to tell them that their son is dead. I made a note of like, really should have changed the music there.
Did you notice who it was
crazy.
playing the son? Is
who?
Mademoiselle Kid from that boring Betty Davis French movie.
Oh, man.
Do not let that kid out of your sight. That kid has a death wish. Every time he shows up in a movie, he's like, it's like the Final Destination spirit is after him.
The fact that it's like multiple times, poor Greer Garson has to say lines like, Sam, you've lost the mill, or Sam, our baby is dead. Like, who wrote this movie?
This is the woman who played the legendary role of Chips's wife in Goodbye, Mr. Chips. And to see her, it's the same feeling I had when William Powell and Myrna Loy got cut down to size in The Great Ziegfeld. I know Greer can do so much better than this, and she's just relegated into this boring role that just, to me, because I've learned my lesson from Kitty Foyle, is just about telling women, you are here to take care of children. And if you can't have children yourself, you better open an orphanage and take care of other people's kids, because that's where you belong. I mean, how unethical is it? First, the husband was like trying to force her to adopt a child. And every time she fucking talks to somebody, she's like, hey, I got a kid back here. It looks great for you. You'd be perfect for this kid. Like, they act like it's fucking Pokemon cards to like adopt a child. It's insane how flagrantly they talk about it.
Just baby matchmaker was what I called her.
It's like a puppy mill.
Think, Jake, it's that weird thing of you can, as a woman, go start an orphanage. It seems like the real life woman, which, by the way, like in real life, this woman was A, not born to a family of massive privilege, and B, she was the one who was the illegitimate adopted child.
It was her lived experience.
So is the Hays Code saying
lived experience.
that this is a movie about how illegitimacy is wrong, but we can't have the main character be illegitimate because then audiences won't relate?
That was literally a rule in the Hays Code about anything surrounding illegitimacy. So but they literally changed this woman's real life story because it was like, well,
why even
that's
make the
against
movie
our morals.
at this point? That's the whole point of the movie.
But like, so to my point and to yours of earlier, like you can't, that is an absolutely valid thing to do. It seems like this woman in real life did a bunch of fantastic
job. Oh my
work.
God, I can't get it right. I thought that parenting was wrong.
No, you're on the right track. So the problem is, right, and you identified it. The problem is that the whole thing that starts her down this path is her husband being like, take care of this orphan child. Like that's not even a thing in the moment. She has to be pushed to that revelation of like, actually, yes, I do want this.
Has to be what she
Instead
wants.
Of like, the narrative is constantly forcing her to become this person. At no point does she choose to become that person, which it sucks.
Like, I get that she did a good thing in the end, but I feel like she didn't have an option the way everybody was guilting her into being a mother the whole time. Eventually, she's just like, fuck it, okay. And then she has a fucking baby mill.
Yeah, I would be curious to see maybe a movie more about her actual life, so long as there's more, more of the friction there where, again, this was her lived experience to have to deal with all of the heavy weights that being a quote unquote illegitimate child means. And then obviously did go on to help change that legislation where it was taken off of the birth certificate. So there's a lot that she did throughout that. But this movie, I feel like it would, to Abby's point earlier, be like a 2-in-1 Walmart bargain bin with Spencer Tracy's Boys Town.
That's,
like
that's the parallel.
Absolutely.
When it started, I was like, oh, Girls Town.
Girls Town.
But boys are allowed. That's patriarchy.
But only if they're white. for the most part, until the very end. There is one truly excellent line in this movie delivered by a small child.
What is it?
Our senator's people, which is
Sonny
the question
boy.
we're all asking.
But yeah, it's like still trying to figure that one out.
And as we learned in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, mostly not.
Yeah, mostly not. I do also have to throw out, since we recently watched Babyface, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the woman playing Edna's maid was Teresa Harris from Babyface, but she barely has a role in this. And apparently, because this was also a Technicolor movie for audiences who aren't aware, but likely because of Gone with the Wind showing a lot more darker skinned African Americans in Technicolor, they literally had Teresa Harris wear a coat of blackface because her natural skin tone photographed too light. Yeah, so it's just like,
that's the monkey's paw thing with black actors getting to move ahead in mainstream cinemas. Like, yes, you can, but there's gonna be a catch, every time. Right. But you just reminded me. Okay, the character of Zeke, their family butler.
Oh my God.
I mean, minstrel, but when he comes back, they're like, we can't afford to pay you, Zeke. He's like, oh, that's fine. Does she ever pay him? Like, by the end, he's just like there.
They never resolve it. They never resolve it, at least.
He is like a cartoon character. It's insane, Zeke's character. I was like, damn, shit, that's bad.
Yeah, this movie was definitely... Hays Code was strong with this, which is unfortunate because, her actual life, I think she did a lot of good. There's a lot interesting in there, but the way that this movie played out just wasn't it. Though I will say about the real Edna Gladney, other than just loosely saying she did a lot of good work, I do want to give her like a more proper shout out. She did help more than 10,000 babies get adopted during her career, and obviously through that legislation revolutionized those adoption practices. So did a lot of good work making sure that adopted children had the same rights as natural children.
Sure.
And that includes also with hospital stays and stuff too, because I think that was also really shady practices at the time.
Sure.
So shout out to Edna for all of that. For
wish someone would make a movie about you that didn't suck.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
I will say no. Actually, no. I'm gonna save that comment for later. Never mind.
Okay.
I think it becomes more relevant as we go on.
Okay.
All right. Are we ready for next movie?
Oh yeah.
Ready.
All right. Here Comes Mr. Jordan stars Robert Montgomery as Joe Pendleton, a boxer who's dead. After being mistakenly collected too early by a first-day Grim Reaper, the forces of the afterlife need to find Joe a new body to live out the rest of his contractually obligated days. He ends up taking over the body of Farnsworth, a corrupt banker recently murdered by his own wife and secretary, in order to save a young woman's father from going to prison. Joe, as Farnsworth, quickly makes use of the banker's fortune to set right various moral wrongs, all while training up to retake his position as a respected prize fighter. Hijinks and more murder inevitably ensue.
Okay. I love this movie, and I know it's a dumb movie. It does not make a lot of sense logically. It reminds me of like a friggin' like Rob Schneider movie from like 1998, like that level of dumbedness. But boy, I just love it. And we have to start off by saying the great Claude Rains, which we all know at this point is a fan favorite on this podcast. He looks and sounds gorgeous in this movie. I mean, his little manlet pilot outfit, him leaning against the plane wing, and every time something weird happens, he's got this like knowing glance, because it's very interesting for Claude. A lot of times you see Claude, he's this big over the top kind of hammy character. This time it's very subdued Claude, but he has such authority in his knowing glances, and it doesn't make any sense what the fuck is happening the entire time, and there's not really any logic to him jumping from one body to the next, and he's like, and Claude's just like, wait, you'll see. It's all gonna make sense in the end. Predestination is real. And just towards the end, there's this scene where Joe / Farnsworth / Murdoch is taking a shower in the locker room after winning the prize fight, which Joe has wanted to do his whole life. So it's like three spirits in one body, and Claude Rains playing Mr. Jordan is just staring at him and watching him, and he has this knowing smile. And later, as he leaves the shower, we see that Joe's mind, his spirit, has
evaporated or been destroyed in some way, presumably by Mr. Jordan's power. And I just thought, this is a really special movie. I don't know what the fuck to think about all the elements going on here, but it's making me feel different things. And Claude Rains, I love you.
I love that. Hopefully he's watching over you with a smug smile right now, too.
Well, we know he's flying spirits back and forth to heaven now.
Right. He's very busy. Yeah. He's very busy. Yeah. I liked it. I thought it was fun, but I think it also crazy that it was nominated for Best Picture, because it was just like, it was a really fun movie, but it's not something where I'd be like, this is contending with the greats. But the like logic behind what body he could and couldn't stay in was just so silly to me, too, because I think there's no sense, because like, well, sorry, you can't be Farnsworth because it wasn't meant to be. Well, bitch, I wasn't supposed to die. But then they let him stay and Murdoch the boxer. Like, what are the rules here? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I put a note for myself for the ending once everything kind of resolves and he ends up, with the woman he fell in love with when he was in Farnsworth's body. And Claude Rains just like looking on so proud and smug. And I was like, but okay. He looks very much content with the like everything worked out as it should and things are going to be okay. And so again, just so proud of himself, even though they royally fucked up. None of this should have happened whatsoever.
Like, so they don't explain like, did Farnsworth and Murdoch, what happens to their spirits? Like, do they go to heaven and then Joe is just in their bodies?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Because I think the whole thing is that your soul
they go to heaven? The afterlife.
The afterlife.
Well, Farnsworth probably went to hell.
I think it's more of a like your soul moves on once you die. Yeah. The Grim Reaper angel type person is supposed to take you at the appropriate time and you go to the afterlife. So I don't think their souls are lingering at all once they go, because they got taken by more competent angel Grim Reapers. But meanwhile, good old Robert Montgomery, who I'm so happy to see again. I've been wondering if we'd see him, because he had such a good energy in The Divorcee. And he was fun in this. So yeah, overall thought it was fun. And I think it obviously inspired a whole slew of you get a second chance via angel intervention. Yeah, Heaven Can't Wait. Angels in the outfield, like all sorts of things have this sort of framework. And
I do think there's some really touching moment, like when Mr. Jordan has clued him off that he's not going to have that much more time in Mr. Farnsworth's body. Yeah. And he sees the girl and he's like, if you see somebody in the future who has a similar look in his eye and he's a boxer, like give him a chance, and it's like.
And then she's like, yeah, but not if he's poor. Just kidding.
But I just like the idea that there is a little bit of magic in the world. And the way this movie presents the idea of the afterlife in this almost kind of bureaucratic, like check the right box type of way is very like identifiable from a 21st century perspective. So it really resonated. And it was just nice to see Claude in this commanding kind of role, but basically he's God. I just love Claude. I love him so much. Every time he came on screen, it's Mr. Jordan, he's here. I love it.
Oh, I do have one more note in this. This is specifically tailored to Jake. I was like, did Jake love this movie because Claude Rains' literal final last words are "so long, champ"? I was like, it's mixing two of his most favorite things.
Wow. What a callback just for Jake.
I'm going to create a simultaneous sequel to a bunch of different movies that creates a shared universe.
Wait, what if the champ didn't die and Robert Montgomery's soul went into the champ?
Oh my God. Can we use AI to recreate all of these actors?
I think there's some ethical quandaries there.
There's some problems with that right away.
But okay. All right, Abby, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were.
Stop me, please.
I mean, it's fine. This doesn't work for me at all. I love the opening. The Final Destination-esque edit with the airplane crash is delightful to me. When he takes out, I was so prepared to be like all in on this movie because he's flying an airplane and then takes out his saxophone and starts steering the airplane with his knees and playing the saxophone. And I was like, hell yeah, we're back, baby. Cinema is real. And then I was kind of like still on board all through the part where they like, do the whole back and forth about the hijinks of his body being cremated and the having having to find a new body for him. And then he gets into Farnsworth. And I love kind of the quantum leap thing that they do. So, I guess Quantum Leap is stealing this. But the fact that they keep with the same actor, like they don't force us to like jump around.
Right.
I was glad. I was worried.
They don't keep the audience in that position. Robert Montgomery just gets to play the guy despite him being in a bunch of different bodies. And we just know that we're seeing him that way. I love all that. But after we get to that point, the comedy doesn't really land for me. I think that his romantic interest, her character description could basically just be woman. And I think that the things that they choose to focus on in this movie are baffling when we could have a movie that is a series of hijinks of Farnsworth's wife and secretary attempting to murder this guy repeatedly.
That'd been cool.
And instead, we don't get any of that. They instead wait like an hour to even try to kill him again. And that's a real bummer. So it's that one of those movies where it's like conceptually and even on paper, I really like the concept of this movie, but it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, they could have done so much more, not only with like the murder hijinks, like you're saying, but even just focusing more rather than on the romance, but on what Farnsworth is essentially setting right while he tries to evade getting murdered consistently.
Instead,
like it
it's
could have
like
been a different movie.
him trying to re-become a boxer again. And I'm
I like the way there's some light
interest, but
anti-capitalism in that, in the sense of like, it's fucking ridiculous that they have this money in the first place. So you might as well use it to like do some ridiculous chase your dream type thing.
Yeah, I feel like it's not. It just doesn't feel like very tightly like realized, I guess.
Right.
It could be great.
Yeah.
It could be great. There's a seed here that I think is fantastic.
Yeah, we will redress that in our champ version of the movie.
I did like the transcendental nature of love, and Mr. Jordan knew the whole time they would end up
Must
together.
be a crazy experience for the lady's character, whose name I frankly don't even for woman.
It doesn't
because
matter.
like I guess she has no opinions. Like,
right.
Convenient that she will love basically any person who shows up in front of her, I guess.
I love the idea of discovering the majesty of the afterlife. And Robert Montgomery's first thought was like, whoa, I got to get back down in my boxing game. It's like he's discovering like essentially the secret to existence. And he's like, oh, come on, folks. I got to get back down there. Like, I'd be like, take me on the plane. Let's go. Let's go to Rivendell, wherever they take the elves or whatever in Lord of the Rings. That'd be cool.
I wonder how much of that is just because it was so much taken for granted for a lot of people that the afterlife is you're up in the clouds with angels and stuff. It's just kind of more of a like, I'm not ready for this rather than a like, oh, it's real, type of moment.
Yeah. That's true. Like, I think like 70% of the United States like attended church at this point.
Right.
So.
Well, they all just saw Sergeant York the week before, so we know what we're dealing with here.
75%.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to say about Here Comes Mr. Jordan?
I adored it. I understand why you guys didn't.
That's it. It was fun.
Yeah. All right. Our next movie is The Little Foxes, which is a William Wyler drama that follows the Hubbards, a wealthy but morally corrupt family trying to entice a Chicago businessman into partnering with them to build a cotton mill in Alabama. With Bette Davis having a great time as the head of the ensemble as Regina, the lone domineering sister alongside her fellow scheming brothers, the family sets out to acquire the capital required to set the plan in motion. Unfortunately, Regina's dying husband isn't on board. Leveraging her daughter Alexandra to bring her husband back home where he can hopefully be manipulated, a cutthroat game of family politics ensues. Regina races to corner her husband into doing what she wants. Her brothers race to secure his money for their own advantage. And poor Alexandra, with her love for her father, is forced to grow up quick if she doesn't want to be swept away by it all.
Who wants to start?
I mean, it's William Wyler.
Yeah.
I think looks really great. I think the performances are really great. I think that there are interesting family politics happening. The summary I feel is very like this happens, but there's some interesting like emotional core happening here in terms of I love to see Bette Davis playing just a huge bitch.
That's my favorite.
Love that for her. Love that for me to be able to watch it. It reminds me a lot of like those stagey family
Succession.
Yeah,
I
Succession
wrote
type.
Racist Succession.
Yeah, it's very much like a family dynasty, family political drama, basically, right? Where it's like all these different people in this family kind of like fighting each other to come out on top. And it's not even necessarily about the business dealing. That's just kind of the excuse, basically, of how we get these people to fight each other. And I think all the pieces are good in terms of like the script is really good. It looks really great. I think the performances are great. I enjoyed watching it at the time. And then now that it's sat for a couple days, I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't think that William Wyler misses. Everything that I've seen from him, I have enjoyed. The one I enjoyed least was The Wuthering Heights, but that's just like more personal preference. This one did work for me. I think the issue for me was so many of the movies this year started right on or near the year 1900 and were in the South, and it was starting to like wear on me. But once you actually get into the scenes of the family conniving and negotiating and the backroom dealing and everything, I really do think it was strong. And I think that Betty Davis and Willie Wyler and Herbert Marshall, who plays her husband, the sickly Horace in this,
he's great.
They are a really powerful combination because they were excellent in The Letter together. And this almost felt like a little bit of a spiritual successor to The Letter in the sense of Herbert Marshall getting some revenge, even in death, on the conniving Betty. But I love the way in the end she wins. But again, as we know from so many themes, at what cost? You know, her daughter hates her. She's leaving. Her siblings don't trust her. So she can finally escape this gilded cage of the Southern culture as this dynamic, intelligent woman and presumably go up to Chicago, but she'll be alone in doing it.
I do also like the exchange between Betty Davis and her daughter in this movie at the end.
Yeah. On the staircase.
It was, on the staircase. To me, it was a little bit reminiscent of the end of Five Star Final, where the daughter is calling out the corruption that basically ended a parent's life and is refusing to be part of it. Except obviously here she's literally part of the family. It was just similar vibe, but I think stronger in this case, both because of the performance and her really seeing Betty Davis's character for who she is and refusing to be a part of it, instead go and do her own thing and be independent. So the scene, after their conversation, Betty Davis invites her to talk and stay in the room because she's uncomfortable being in this house by herself. Was so good. And the body language of Betty as she just like stares at her and unbunches her fist from her skirt and then just walks back up alone was like, oh damn, that's good. Yeah. Like this is good performance. All of this was very, very good.
And shout out to Teresa Wright, who plays Alexandra the daughter, because that could have been a very thankless role, but she manages to really like make it
makes
work
the most
and feel
of it.
very.
I would say more so than the girl in Five Star Final who was the 1 week
exactly.
element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of similar to Jezebel, because this is another William Wyler, Betty Davis set in the South type movie. I do think it is at least somewhat significant that we have such a large supporting Black cast in this movie. Like you see, even though you get, the kids, you have just people working in the background, you get some of the stereotypes, but you have such a breadth of different people on display on the screen, and not all of them are stereotypes, that it felt like a huge breath of fresh air, obviously after Gone with the Wind. But even in so many of these movies where you would expect to see, because like you said, they're set in the South, and yet we'll see like one Black character and they're the maid, right? Mm-hmm. Or one Black character and they're like the minstrel type butler. So even just having them be such an integrated part of the movie and the setting was like, at least this is something, approaching a little bit more of
there's an awareness that this is like a reality of the time and the place, right? Where instead of just being like, we're gonna throw a couple African Americans in here for some color, like literally.
Yeah, literally. And then maybe some comedy.
I think Wyler is a really conscientious world builder. And you see that too in the theme of talking about the Southern economy, even in that transition from, it's epitomized in the Hubbards marrying into Bertie's plantation owning family. The Hubbards are these backstabbing financial capitalist, social climbers, whereas Bertie is from a bygone era where people inherited their wealth and property and slaves. And you see how that social power is morphing in that world of the Southern society. And I love that that scene that the elder brother says to Betty at the end as he's defeated, but he's taking it in stride, and he says, you know, we'll own this country one day. They won't even try to stop us. And at that point in the story, as you've seen them run circles around one another with all this kind of collateral damage, you're kind of ready to believe them. And unfortunately, you know, in the modern world we live in, it feels real too. But on a lighter note, just in reference to the strong black characters, I did like the kind of Mamie character in this. And there's one scene where Aunt Bertie, Horace, the husband, David, the kind of progressive town journalist, Alexandra, and the Mammy are sitting in the garden having a lunch. And I just wrote dream blunt rotation because I thought that they were each brought something unique and interesting to the table from their personalities and backgrounds.
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I do have trivia background. Kind of made me sad. Apparently, William Wyler and Betty Davis fought a lot during the filming of this. And sometimes that would happen in other movies where they would butt heads. But I guess in this movie, it was particularly egregious. And in the letter, they had been fighting a lot, and she gave in to a lot of his demands during that. But in this one, she held her ground and threatened to walk off the picture completely. Oh. They eventually got her back. But this was, I found out, the last time that they worked together. So that was sad to me because they've kind of become a staple of like, oh, Betty Davis, William Wyler. Yeah. And it's sad that this was the last one because it was really good. You know,
that's interesting because she still had a lot of positive things to say about him in much later interviews. So it sounds like maybe their working relationship just got like almost too comfortable. You know, you work together enough that you start trying to push the envelope, and maybe that's kind of what happened.
I think both were very stubborn and confident in their way being the right way. And they got to a point where neither one felt that power dynamic between them anymore. And so it's just like, well, okay, we're just not gonna agree.
Maybe one of those like, I love you, but I can't work with you.
Yeah.
kind of things.
And the title leads with the quote from like the Song of Solomon from the Bible. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil vines, for our vines have tender grapes. What does that mean? What does it mean?
I could not tell you.
Okay, at least it's not just me.
I think that plays into, not to bring back Succession again, but when Kendall talks about his father, it's that thing of, you may hate us and we may be rotten people, but we are the folks that generate the wealth. Like, I think the Hubbards are the foxes in that.
I've looked it up on the internet since we're...
Come on, my male boundless confidence bullshitting was... You got to cheat AI. Okay, go ahead.
Wow, AI. Apparently, it's a warning of letting destructive animals into a vineyard. So essentially, the small problems that you let in can like destroy a crop. So it's basically like they're the little foxes of like their politicking and backstabbing. Like, it might feed the fox essentially, but at some point it will destroy your vineyard.
Okay, so that's more succinct. Yeah.
All right. Anything else to say about the little foxes?
I think we're making pretty good time today. We're doing good.
Yeah.
Incoming hour-long discussion about Citizen Kane.
I mean, if there was a movie that would be warranted. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right. So our next movie is Citizen Kane, a little-known pseudo-biographical drama about the fictional man Charles Foster Kane, a prolific newspaper man and media tycoon who has died with a mysterious final word on his lips, Rosebud. Reporter Jeremy Thompson is tasked with discovering its meaning and sets out to interview Kane's various friends and relations. Through these interviews, we recollect the man, his origins as a boy ripped from his impoverished and abusive home and thrust into a position of privilege, his wildly successful growth of the Inquirer newspaper, his failed marriages, and the breakdown of his close friendships. Shot, written, and led by Hollywood newcomer Orson Welles, the movie all but outright mocks the conventions of the biopic genre it's pretending at. It eschews the one damn thing after another format where most biopics, or alleged biopics, seem to think that being shown a series of events in a person's life is the key to understanding them entirely. Instead, Citizen Kane is obsessed with the play of light and shadow, those within the image on screen and in the heart of its central character. How do you know a person, it asks, and is it possible to ever know someone completely?
Very poignant as always, and appropriate, particularly in this case, considering the content. Yeah, this is the first time I had watched Citizen Kane, and it's really tough
when a movie's reputation is built up so high in your mind. It's almost impossible to meet that. I will say, now that we have watched so far leading up to this, I can certainly understand why this was viewed to be very groundbreaking cinematically from a narrative perspective, as you referenced there, the kind of disjointed storytelling. Cinematically, I mean, there's countless instances you can mention, but really interesting and new stuff going on here. And just presenting a narrative in like the newsreel format and then shifting to flashbacks and then modern, it's very dynamic. And I imagine for an audience, there was a lot of moments like, you can do that, in watching this.
Sure.
But I'd love to hear your guys' take, because I have a lot of thoughts, but I kind of I always like to hear where everybody's coming from,
I had watched it before as part of like a film class ages ago. And when I had watched it, I enjoyed it, but it didn't blow me away. So kind of similar to like A Star is Born that I had seen before. And then when having all of the context was just like crying by the end and just much more moved. This one turned up to 11 versus what I remembered what it was, because right off the bat, I was just like, wow, they really let Tolan go crazy. And it's not just him, it's also art direction. It's also Orson Welles, but they did so much with panning and depth of field and just so many interesting shots. Even when they finished the newsreel where the light's filtering through and it's just like that room of all of the reporters talking about what to do about everything. Great scene transitions, the camera, it was just, I almost went into this expecting like, okay, we've seen now like Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. I thought it was going to be similar to Gone with the Wind, where it's like, oh, this is something that is held up as this big epic that is just a phenomenal movie way ahead of its time. And then you watch it in the context and you're like, it was very good and very sweeping, but it was standing on the shoulders of other people from before. This one, I don't know. It, like I started, I was like, oh my God, this was so far ahead of its time. Like they're doing crazy work. So I actually was
the part where it falls out of the newsreel into like the viewing room and it has that strong light. It's like,
God, yeah.
Oh my God, this is a movie.
Yeah. It looked so good. And I still really liked, the world building and kind of the interesting things they're doing to make this different than a lot of biopics. And I also have to shout out the sound design, because that is something that is very, very well done in this movie. And we've had good sound design in other movies, but not to this level. When they're in like the big marble rooms and it's so echoey within those, it's just so good. And another
what a great
scene
metaphor
where
for their relationship at that point,
Yeah, just so empty. But they do it earlier too, when they're going through like the record rooms and stuff.
That was my favorite scene.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
One of my also favorite sound design scenes was when they are doing the whole, his new wife, when he builds the opera house for her and all of the like overlapping performances with the opera that is just like slightly off key. And you have the overlay of newspapers that he controls with stories about like, she's sensational, the crowds are sold out, we love her so much. And he just has like the overlay of his face determined and clapping that eventually fades out to just the buzz of the light bulb with the sound getting like dimmer and higher. It was just like, damn, this is good.
So
this is some good shit. So
also like a score that is not afraid to let things rest. I feel like, again, we'll talk about this later, but our favorite villain, I feel like Max Steiner, is like the farther we go along.
It's too powerful.
Put in a lot of mustard.
The letter, I love that theme in the letter.
There's. I'm not saying he's.
He's not bad. He
but
just
like,
doesn't like silence.
Yeah, but there's a real restraint in how the score is used here, which is so it's just a piece of the movie instead of being like the constant in the movie. It's lovely.
Yep. And then I think you had mentioned this maybe when we were watching Stagecoach, Abby, the way that the camera looks up at certain characters and looks down at certain characters. And Orson Welles did the same thing in this movie, I think directly because of Stagecoach. So that, I don't know if I would have caught necessarily if we hadn't already seen it in Stagecoach. So that's not to say everything in this movie is new, but everything that's not new, they use well. And then everything that is new is just like fucking mind blowing.
There is a movie that I don't think is particularly a good movie. However, I really enjoy it. It's called Me and Orson Welles. which is a frothy nonsense movie. I think it has Zac Efron in it. And it basically is like a guy who shows up and is around for when Orson Welles is making movies or whatever. And there is a scene where they're like, how are we supposed to get this shot? And I think it's basically a reference to the scene that's in Citizen Kane where the camera's so low, like you can see everyone's feet and the ceiling and all that stuff. And it's looking up at Kane and Jed Leland as they're having this basically like the fallout of their friendship.
I like
right?
that scene.
Fantastic scene. And they're like, how are we going to get the camera this low? Because cameras were notoriously gigantic. But Orson Welles in this frothy movie is like, cut a hole in the floor. I don't care. The places they put cameras in this movie are crazy. Like the stuff that they do with overlaying certain shots with other shots and like the depth of field where it's like you have two characters very close to the camera in focus, but you also have this deep depth of field so you can see all the stuff happening in the background too. Terrific. I'd also seen this movie a couple times. I think I saw it, during film school or whatever, and then watched it later. And then I think this is like the third time I've seen this movie. And kind of similarly, I think the first time I saw it, I was not like blown away by it. It was like, yeah, cool, great. I think the second time I had more of a concept of like the things that they're doing with the camera and how they're shooting this movie are really evolutionary for the time. But I think this is the first time I've seen it in context in terms of like having actually seen a bunch of the movies from the period, kind of like knowing what movies look like typically. So getting that like blow away moment of like, oh, this actually does look crazy good. And is structured really interesting, is doing really fascinating things with editing and that kind of stuff. That's a real treat. I do still think like for me, Citizen Kane doesn't quite land 100%. It's fantastic. I can appreciate the fact that it's a phenomenal movie, but there's like a coldness at the heart of it, which I don't think is unintentional in terms of like the emotional story of Kane and his associates and friends and that kind of thing. That just doesn't quite, it's just not for me, basically.
We're on the same
that kind of
wavelength.
like, yeah, where it's, I think because, and I think this is not a bad thing. I think Orson Welles like clearly despised this guy who is like a very thin lampshading of William Randolph Hearst, like a notorious newspaper man of the 30s and 40s. He's the bad guy in Newsies. Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before.
Similarly had a girlfriend who he tried to promote in Hollywood. Yeah.
He had an elaborate like estate with a literal zoo and that kind of stuff.
If you want to hear more about William Randolph Hearst, please go and see our episode with 5-Star Final because we talked at length about him at that time. Since when watching 5-Star Final, which is obviously a critique of like the cold, cutthroat nature of yellow journalism and tabloid culture, not at all about William Randolph Hearst necessarily, but Hearst was like, this movie is about me, and then had all of his newspapers like deride the movie. And I'm like, I feel like that says more about you than anything else.
It's like, don't tell on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You're literally telling on yourself. So similarly here, as you're saying, thinly veiled sort of biopic about him. And of course, he similarly made sure that all of his newspapers forbade advertisement and tried to control the narrative of it. But yeah, you finish your thoughts. Sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you for that added context. But I think because you can tell Orson Welles like really loathes that person and kind of doesn't want to in any way. And I think this is, I get the impulse, doesn't want to in any way make this person particularly sympathetic or like laud this person in a way that I think, frankly, we've seen a lot of in terms of movies of like, hey, this guy sucks, but also he did a lot of cool stuff. So maybe he doesn't actually suck that much.
Sure.
That there is kind of and I had a long conversation with my roommate about this, so apologies, Donna, if I steal some of your words. But it's kind of like, because of that, you kind of never quite see him as a person. And like, to be fair, like that's also tying into this whole concept of how do we know this person and the whole question of Rosebud.
And how the public sees him. And
how the public sees him. But there's kind of that, because that's so ephemeral and lacking and you don't quite ever reach the interiority of the character and even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, well, obviously that's intentional and it works for the themes of the movie, but it just doesn't, it makes a lot of the things that should be like really gutting, like his friendship breakup with Leland and his separating from and / torturing his wives. Like it doesn't quite hit me where I want it to hit me. But all the pieces are there and it's really masterfully done. So again, it's one of those things that's really well put together, but it just doesn't quite poke at me particularly, but I don't necessarily think that's a failing in the movie. It's just, it doesn't land for me.
Yeah, it worked for me because, like you're saying, it felt intentional. And I think overall, the reflection of who he is, we see these glimpses of emptiness in him, like when his second wife finally leaves him and he destroys the room and stuff. But the way he tries to get her to stay is very much like, well, how can you do this to me sort of thing? Like, he just so lacks that core part of empathy that would make so many of those other scenes cutting and hard to watch.
Yeah. Maybe what I really want to see is from the perspective of the other people.
Right. Yeah,
because we see a lot of Leland, who I think is probably the most we get the most from, is we don't see the start of their relationship at all.
Right.
We see them when they're already friends. So we don't necessarily know the extent to which their relationship breaking off is a loss to Leland necessarily.
Yes. Yeah, that I would love to see.
And same thing with like his wives, right? Because we're getting so many of these relationships weirdly from Kane's perspective, despite the fact that we're being told them by the other parties, is I want to see the emotional damage that's being done to like Leland and his wives. And I feel like that might help ground it a little bit. And I just don't quite get that.
Yeah, I can see that because I do think the movie tries to do some of that. Obviously, you see all of the transitions through time with the first wife. So you see how it erodes their happiness and like the direction of their life. But I do agree that you don't get the emotional impact from it because it is just told from a reporter trying to put the puzzle pieces together point of view. It's not really trying to dig into the human connections and impact other than to find out like who the fuck was Rosebud. You know, like it's like the people investigating his life are not intentionally looking for the deeper connections. They're just trying to get an answer to this like riddle, you know. So I think it still works, but I can see a version of this that would hit harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more, Abby, with your interpretation. Overall, 95% of it. When you got to the solution, I have a little bit of a disagreement in the sense that what I need for this to work and for it to have an emotional core, which I feel it doesn't, it has that coldness, which even if it is intentional, it makes it less compelling to watch, is I did need a scene where we actually see Kane as himself, because we never see him alone, except for when he tears that room apart. And it's very clear based on his personality and the circumstances of his life that because he had such early trauma, he had to develop a thick skin and to learn to project what was appropriate from situation to situation, audience to audience. So what would have been very helpful to me, I feel like, because they mention this very offhandedly, but his first wife and son actually die in a car wreck. And it's never even addressed in the narrative of the flashbacks to Kane. So what would have been powerful for me, although maybe this would have undercut the point of the movie, would have been to have had a scene where Kane maybe even has, some people might think it's corny, but like a monologue or a soliloquy where he owns up to the reality that maybe in his mind, him selecting this second wife as kind of a new, I thought their dynamic was very much like King Kong and the woman in King Kong. He's found this beautiful, pure thing that he's never encountered before, and maybe it'll soften him up. But if he had this realization that like he blames himself for what happened to his own son and his first wife, that would have then made it more compelling to me how far and how deep he's willing to sink into the humiliation of his second wife. Because to me, the whole thing is like Citizen Kane is that meme of I am not owned. I am not owned. And like you see him clapping in the theater and the camera zooming in on his face, everyone else around him like this is ridiculous. But he just cannot, whether it be his management style at the paper and the hypocrisy that entails, or his kind of vanity-filled political career, or his opulent palace, he must be correct and he must not be proven wrong. And ultimately, that's so self-destructive, but I would have loved to have seen that verbalized in a way rather than just intuited to where you kind of draw some of those conclusions, if that's your interpretation. But I totally agree that because we are only kind of seeing this from the outside in, it makes it really difficult to understand this guy's thought process. And again, that's the whole point of the movie. So if you're there for it, you're there for it. I just found it to be less compelling for that reason.
I don't know if I would have liked a monologue, but I was expecting and therefore kind of surprised that they never really showed the moment where his wife and son did die, like him reading a newspaper or getting a phone call or anything like that. I was just like, so when in that timeline did they get into the car accident?
I think I think, okay, so I think that there is something interesting happening there in terms of the only time that we see him alone is in that room. But also we know that we're being told about that room by a servant in the household.
Right.
So do we even know that what is happening there is what happened? Because really he wasn't in that room. He just witnessed later the destruction of that room.
Right.
And I guess he did hear the rosebud thing. So really technically that is also a witness thing. So the fact that we don't ever see his reaction to his ex-wife and child dying suggests to me that that is something that happened privately, that no one witnessed, that
Isn't
you
that critical
as an audience or like the journalist, like you are not allowed to see it because no one saw it, which I think is fascinating, like in terms of like the theme of the movie. But I think we're all kind of circling this. And I guess this is really kind of the thwarting mystery at the heart of the movie that Orson Welles is saying is you can't know this person. So it feels so silly to be like, this is the part that didn't work for me where I don't get to know this person in the movie that says you can't know this person.
Right.
I'll tell you what, it probably resonated a lot in that time period where fathers and grandfathers were so distant from the people in their lives and in their families. And, you'd go, why was grandpa so mad? I can imagine in that time period, because this is really like, I got some Mad Men vibes here in the sense that, men can have these kinds of feelings. Men can have trauma and have it impact their behavior for their whole lives. I feel like that was kind of the undercurrent of this to some extent. And it feels derivative now because we're in the 21st century, but I can appreciate at that time, it was probably a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. And to your earlier point when we first started talking about this, like how much of this is me being kind of a curmudgeon of like, well, yeah, it's the greatest movie of all time.
Like I have a responsibility to attack it.
but I don't feel it way down in my guts.
It didn't stir my soul.
Yeah.
So not like Mr. Jordan did.
It's hard to come to something that is like so foundational in terms of modern movie making. It's like me trying to watch X-Files now after the episodic Monster of the Week stuff is like, it was so pervasive through like my entire childhood, being like, I mean, yeah, it's good, but
yeah, I think it's so funny because I think the first time I watched it, I had maybe more of that, but I also was lacking so much foundational knowledge that
just tell us, Abby and I are being pedants. Just tell us.
No. What I'm saying is that when I had that feeling of like, oh, this is allegedly the greatest movie of all time, I watched it. It's okay. Like I had no foundation to stand on to even say that. Now you guys, can, if you still feel that way, you still feel that way, and I think that that's very valid. Because you are plugging in the gaps of this kind of film history and stuff. Right. Versus for me, now that I have that foundation more so, I loved it. I thought it was great. It really worked for me.
It's nice to hear.
So I was shown the error
I think that's awesome.
my ways for sure.
I definitely feel like I appreciate it a whole lot more now in terms of having watched a bunch of these movies, really knowing the context of it and kind of than when I first saw it. And then I was like in film school and I should have allegedly known better, right? But having all that history of watching all these movies and then seeing this is it really has made me appreciate this movie a lot more than I think I would have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It really is.
Like watching this the same year as Sergeant York, you're just like, God damn.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, even if it doesn't get 100% for me, it's like, I can get it to 98, which before it was like not that close for me.
Sure.
A couple things to mention. Definitely. Orson Welles is such a presence on screen. I mean, the power in his delivery and the complexity behind his expression, the thoughtfulness in that performance is really, really incredible. And you can tell his fingerprints are all over almost every aspect of this story. Yeah. And I don't know. It's just it's a great film, I will say. I feel a responsibility to be a little harder on it than other movies. But Sarah, what you're saying is true. And I don't know if you guys remember, but in The Sopranos, when the wives start
I haven't seen The Sopranos.
Oh,
what?
Well,
I know.
I don't think this is a big spoiler, but Sarah yelled at me earlier.
No.
The wives, they start a movie watching group and they get together like once a month or whatever to watch a movie. And the first one they do is Citizen Kane. And it wraps up, you see like the screen pulls away from the house and there's a silence for a beat. And I think it's Rosalia Priel goes, on the cinematography. And it just, that line kept going through my head as you guys were like gassing up the camera work. I was like, we've reached that moment. I've been looking forward to getting to that moment in our story here.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
I will say there's so many little touches in this script that I really love. And my favorite thing is that Kane calls Jed Leland, who everyone either calls him Leland or Jed, by his full first name, Jedediah. And then Leland calls Charles Kane Charlie. Like the mismatch of formal to informal is like such a good friend thing that says so much about their relationship, even if we don't see things. Yeah. And there's just a bunch of little touches like that feel really thoughtfully and decisively done.
Another thing that I wanted, because obviously in terms of how the movie was received, it was such a mixed bag. Yeah. So
that doesn't surprise me.
I guess to me, it was kind of surprising just compared to a lot year movies that came out this year.
The top grossing movie in this year is Sergeant York.
We've said this, 90% of the population is the farm fair movie, okay? Just keep that in mind. State fair. Sorry.
Yeah. So, because, part of that, obviously, William Randolph Hearst, with his newspaper power and everything, really aimed to take down the movie. And he even offered to buy the negative from the studio head so he could destroy it before it was screened. But they had already crazy. But Orson Welles had already previewed it. Literally. And you literally are just digging yourself into a larger grave at this point.
It must have been so delightful as Orson Welles to be like, yo, William Randolph Hearst wants to burn the negative in your movie. Where you
speaking of, and I don't know, because it's who are the witnesses to this, but allegedly Orson Welles at one point was in an elevator with William Randolph Hearst before the movie had premiered, and he invited him to the premiere, and William Randolph Hearst declined. And as he walked out of the elevator, allegedly, Orson Welles was like, Charles Foster Kane would have accepted. And I'm like, is that something he actually said? Or is that one of his, I wish I said this in that moment, and I'm going to write in my book like I actually said
this is the sick burn I thought about 10 years ago that later. I must get down on paper.
Exactly. But yeah, so he had already screened the movie to a bunch of industry figures, and they all loved it. So it got its limited theatrical release. And then critics from non-Hearst newspapers really praised the film. And then obviously Hearst newspapers just didn't even review it until the 70s, which a little late by that point.
Wow. That's crazy.
From beyond the grave.
What that all led to, because Hearst's shadow and influence was so large over the Academy and everything, that even though this was nominated for 9 awards, it was booed every time a nomination for it was announced. And
that's crazy.
Yes, it's actually really, especially because this was Orson Welles' first feature film. Crazy to have your peers and people you look up to literally booing your movie for each announcement.
It's
and
awesome.
Then it won Best Original Screenplay, and apparently there was just very light clapping for all of that.
Seems crazy because we'll talk about this more later when we talk about The Magnificent Ambersons, which I believe was coming up soon. But I know he lost editing rights to that movie. So I wonder if that will tie into that at all.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that because we're not quite at, the blacklisting stage of Hollywood or anything yet. But I do think I remember reading that Hearst also accused Orson Welles of being a communist during this time to, again, try and continue just ruining his career as a whole.
Well, do we have anything else to say about Citizen Kane? Probably one of the most talked about movies literally of all time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We got Gone with the Wind Down, Wizard of Oz, Citizen Kane. We're getting through it.
All right, so Hold Back the Dawn is a romantic drama starring Charles Boyer as a Romanian gigolo in Mexico trying to gain entry to the United States, and Olivia de Havilland as the American schoolteacher he cons into marrying him. Supported by a cast of fellow refugees who are either trying to enter the States legally or by running their own cons, we follow Boyer's George as he jumps through hoops to keep his innocent bride unawares and a step ahead of the immigration inspector eager to spoil his con. If Boyer's George can manage to do all that without falling in love with his lovely wife in the process, he might really have a good thing going for him.
I love this one. You guys know I'm a little bit of a sucker for these kinds of romantic movies, but I thought this one really worked. I mean, it's so timely with immigration being such a major issue right now. And Charles Boyer, I think he's so cool, man. When he's talking to chicks, he's just like, I'm taking notes. I'm scrambling down notes as quick as I can. But I'm really starting to get into the Olivia de Havilland, Joan Fontaine career rivalry here. And I think they're both really impressing me. There's a scene in here when the news is broken to Olivia de Havilland that he just married her to get citizenship. She has this kind of reserved, controlled devastation in her face that because she's so good with that, you don't know whether she's going to back him or not in the following scene. And it creates this really effective tension in that scene. And I just love this. I had no idea where it was going the whole time from the beginning. I'm like, what is this? We're in Mexico now. It almost like broke the fourth wall with him being on the film set earlier on. So I loved his narration, that great voice. Yeah, I had a great time with this, but tell me why I'm wrong.
No, I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
So Abby can tell us why we're both wrong, I guess, in a little bit. But no, I think I just like, in terms of romantic comedies or romantic dramas, like movies where scoundrels are kind of reformed unintentionally by following. I'm like, that's fun. Like, it's a good time. It's also potentially the basis for the toxic, like, I can fix him mentality that deludes a lot of people out there. But when it works, it's fun. All right. So no, I had fun with it. I also agree that Charles Boyer, very charming. He's just very good at having a look of yearning on his face when he looks at someone. He did it in this movie. He did it in the one that Jake really loved. He did it
in... I don't even remember the name.
Love Affair?
Yes,
Love Affair.
Yeah, Love
Sorry,
Affair.
He did it in Love Affair, and then All This in Heaven Too with Bette Davis.
Yeah.
It works. It works in this as he like is trying not to fall in love with her, but then of course he falls in love with her. And I'm sort of like, in terms of the Olivia de Havilland, Joan Fontaine rivalry, I can't pick sides. Like, every time I watch Olivia de Havilland, I'm like, I think I prefer her. And then I watch a Joan Fontaine movie, I'm like, no, I think I prefer Joan Fontaine.
I'm in the
Like,
same boat.
they're just both great. Yeah, they're both really good. And it's unfortunate that their relationship was so fraught, because I know this one, since her sister later in the movie we'll talk about, won for Best Actress in that. I think one of the catalysts for more of the public rivalry going on was when that was announced, Olivia de Havilland stood up to congratulate Joan. And I think Joan was so shocked that she didn't even notice it and seemed to like brush past her. And then this created this whole, she was snubbed, and it just blew up from there in the public.
Sure.
Well, I know that when I was reading a little bit from Joan's perspective, I think their mother always favored Olivia, and Olivia was supposed to be the star. And when Joan tried to imitate her in Olivia's mind, there was resentment there.
Sure.
But yeah, the movie itself, this I found out too, it was loosely based on, it was a book, but that book was autobiographical to some degree of the woman who had their partner who like married them as an American sort of thing. But I think their partner had been a refugee from Hitler's Germany.
So Abby, you didn't hate it?
No, I think this is fine. I don't think it's a spectacular, great movie or anything, but I think that it's perfectly enjoyable. I think Boyer, I don't know. His character is easily the favorite character that I've seen him play. I think that just in general, like, the script is charming. I think the things that it chooses to focus on are like, to me, this is all the right stuff. Like, the things that it chooses to focus on are really doing a great job of like advancing the story and also still like making the characters charming. I love the inclusion of the other people waiting to go over to the States, where you've got
successful anchor
I feel
baby.
like I learned.
Successful anchor baby. Fantastic. And also the guy who is like an honorary citizen, and also the people who don't get a resolution at the end and are still waiting. I think it's very charming. I groaned when it started, because I am learning to really hate any movie that starts with a title card of, this is a folksy story that we got told, and here, we're going to present it to you. But I actually think that the framing is fun, where it kind of like shows us his character at the end of the story or close to the end of the story, and then flashes back to go through this whole thing. I think it's fun. And I think it's totally fine.
Yeah. I love that she leaves all her students in that random mechanic place in the middle of the night in Mexico while she's like gallivanting with this dude.
She only goes across the street to call,
just a phone call
on the telephone at that
Didn't
point.
they
like,
then go and get married while they were at the hotel?
Yeah, but she like made sure that they were all asleep, and like as far as like 1940s, late 1930s, early 1940s childcare goes, that's basically
you're just glad it's the same count when you get back as when you left. That's the baseline.
Yeah, like you count them all, they're still there. Cool.
They might be a Mexican child among them, but it's the same number of children.
I love the scene This happens early. There's such a bleak comedy in this movie that I really appreciate. I love bleak comedy and I love a con man. So this is going to get me. But the scene where he shows up at the hotel and the reason that there's an opening in the hotel is because someone has literally hanged themselves
while waiting. They couldn't wait.
The
any
manager
longer.
of the hotel gets summoned up there and he's like, shit. And he goes downstairs to call the police, and Boyer's character is there hey, you have anywhere for me to stay? And he's like, give me a second. And I can hook you up with a new room, buddy.
Did you guys catch the MAGA moment in this movie though? It was rough.
There were kind of
so they have that happy coincidence that they end up as he drives into the Mexican countryside in that village that's having those ceremonies for newlyweds, which is a really nice sequence and everything. But then afterward, he's sitting with Olivia kind of by the water, and they're getting to know each other a little bit more. And they're talking about how difficult it is for immigrants to get into the country. And he goes, your people are building high dams to keep out these streams, referencing the water there. And she says,
why did he sound like Dracula?
That was a bad accent. It didn't come through the way I thought it would. So let's just move on. But she quickly responds, just to keep out the scum, George.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I think though, I wrote that down, but the full kind of context is that she's the one who brings up immigration being important, right? She's like, America is like a lake that's clear and fresh and it never gets stagnant while new streams are flowing in, pro-immigration. And then he's like, as you said, well, they're building pretty high dams to keep those streams from flowing in. And then she, as you said, responds, well, just to keep out the scum, George.
I mean, is that not Trump's perspective?
Oh, for sure. But it's there's two things going on there. One, it's a very unfortunate lake analogy, but also how they thought and think of immigrants, like a lot of people. But we as the viewer also have seen much more humanized portrayals of people who are waiting 8 to 10 plus years just for a chance to get in. So we as the viewer and he as George know that she's wrong. Yeah. Just to be clear that it wasn't a statement of the movie necessarily. It was more a
I looked at it as
statement of
a reality of the times, just not to make excuses
of how people thought.
Yeah, kind of callous.
Right. The other kind of callous racist thing that obviously gets said is when she comes back after they get married and she's like, everyone is pretty understanding about it except for this one woman who said something nasty. She said that you're coming to America with empty hands to grab all you can. And then someone responded to her saying that oh, so I suppose your great grandma was Pocahontas. So there's this recognition of there are people who think this way, but they are wrong, which I think was very refreshing because it's still so relevant.
No, yeah.
80
I was going to say that's
later.
a generational thing. A lot of Trump people that I know will be yeah, I'm racist, but everyone's racist. That's just the way that it is. They'll be I love Native Americans. It's fucked up what happened to Native Americans, but I don't think any more people should be allowed in the country. That's the way people are, and I think that liberal discourse has kind of made us shocked by it sometimes, but it's funny to see it unvarnished.
Yeah, it's pretty much every generation being okay, but it's enough immigration now. It's enough immigration now. It's enough immigration now, which is crazy. Yeah. And I guess during this time too, wasn't America as a country not really accepting very many refugees from Germany and stuff too? Isn't that another element that probably plays into this messaging?
It gets referenced a little bit here, but there was essentially you would go and wait and get a number. Yeah. They allowed a certain number of people to come over from each country, basically. And depending on the relationship with the country, that number might be higher or lower. It's basically they only issued a certain number of visas. Right. So you would have to just wait for your number to come up and just stagnate on the other side.
Right.
And I don't know exactly. I think you had to essentially be there to apply for a number. There might have been exceptions or that kind of thing, but this is now, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, you had to just go add your name to a list and wait for them to pull your number up. And then we saw, there were exceptions with if you didn't meet the criteria for whatever reason, they might still communist, you have some kind of illness or whatever, you might not qualify even if you have a number.
Yeah, so it makes sense that it would be additionally relevant at that time then, where it's there are probably more refugees seeking safety, and not being allowed in through the same sort of closed channels that we had at that time and that we still have today.
I will say it was a huge relief to watch this movie and realize that that was its perspective in terms of like really humanizing these people. Because when the movie started, I was like, oh God, oh no.
Yeah.
No, I was surprised by how like open-minded it was for the time. But one other thing I just wanted to mention, do you guys remember when the cops roll up on, it's towards the end, and Charles has parked inappropriately right out front of the hospital, and these cops roll up on it and they get out. And the one cop's like, sassy.
Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah.
I was dying.
Very
it was
funny.
so out of left field. Let's bring back sassy.
Good for him.
That's all I have to say. I like this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's perfectly serviceable.
And now for our next film.
All right. Are we ready to talk about our next movie, allegedly?
Let's rip the Band-Aid off.
All right. So, One Foot in Heaven is a biographical drama following Frederick March as William Spence, a medical student who receives the call to become a Methodist pastor and uproots his and his fiance's lives to pursue spreading the good word. What follows is an episodic 2 hours of the Spences, who call each other mother and father, leapfrogging from one destitute parsonage to another, where the only thing that seems to change are how old everyone is and how many children they have. Don't worry, though, there is one constant in their life. Their love of God? No, don't be ridiculous. The uplifting power of faith hardly features in this movie. Instead, One Foot in Heaven offers us a far more relatable core theme for young housewives in 1941. What if your husband was a huge asshole?
Yeah.
This is the worst movie we've watched so far, and I will die on that hill. I
don't know. It's between this and Our Town. I don't know.
Oh, I forgot about Our Town. Oh, fuck.
You blocked it from your minds. Yeah.
But the thing is, Our Town,
they're kind of tied.
like, I'm never going to think about Our Town again. This pissed me off so much that this is in my brain now. Yeah. So I resent it more.
And it it had Frederick March, who I usually like. And so now I'm just like, oh,
why does he do so many batshit movies, Frederick?
It's just crazy. This is first and foremost. This is not a movie. Like it's not a movie. It's a series of
Father Knows Best
episodic. Father Knows Best. Yeah, things where like they jump from one place to another, and then it seems like a proto mega church foundation. But like, yeah, it's not a movie. It's just miserable to watch. This is the movie that my roommate is asking for like reparations for having to witness. They had to go
I'll
make
pay your roommate a little bit within reason.
You'll pay my roommate. I'll give you a Venmo. But yeah, this is not a movie, but also like it's just so relentlessly mean-spirited, which is crazy for a movie that like thanks a bunch of clergymen consultants at the beginning. Like I don't understand if this is your movie that you're trying to show like the power of faith and like conversion and how great it is spiritually to go be a pastor, and then this is the movie where like this guy like can't get along with anyone, moves his family constantly, frankly hates all of his parishioners, and the only thing that seems to bring him any joy is building this giant church with a fancy organ, like this weird materialism. And at no point, like scripture gets beaten around a lot in this movie and quoted, but it's not like any of these people are living it. They don't seem to like feel any empowerment by their faith in God. It gets used as a cudgel. It's so nasty. It's so mean-spirited.
Nasty and mean-spirited is such a good way to put it. So unfortunately, this was one of the movies that I binged, yesterday. So
my God.
It was really rough. But my notes, there's one towards the end that was literally like, what's the point of this movie? And it is exactly because what you said, it's not a movie. It's just this dude being an asshole consistently, but we're supposed to like root for him to build the church he wants. Like, most of my notes are like, girl, leave him, girl, leave, after like multiple points. Yeah. She fights so hard for like the name that she wants for her son, and he agrees to it. And then in front of the congregation, he decides on the name that he wanted all ahead.
One of the meanest things I've ever seen.
Afterward, when you expect there to be a confrontation, she just immediately accepts it. And that happens again and again and again. And the first time it happened, I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity for them to show that he can learn, just like he did when he went to see that movie.
And compromise, and
but
understand.
No, she is a vessel for his self-realization. And she came from good stock. She had opportunities to be, he was going to be a doctor. Instead, she's got to live impoverished, and they intentionally induce material suffering on themselves because they think there's some kind of divinity in that. Mother Teresa was like that. No offense to people that
like Mother Teresa, but it's been widely written. She thought that there was divinity in suffering, and there's not. I'm sorry. I don't care if that's like heretical to you to say, but it's fucking horseshit, and it's gross. I mean, this woman's life was destroyed because this guy had a warped interpretation of this religious text. It's enraging.
I also think it's so different to you yourself be suffering and find that there is some importance or meaning to that.
You want to do that.
Versus here, it's like there's meaning in suffering. So I'm going to make sure you never get what you want. Well, I get what I want.
Your kids don't even have a choice.
And the wife, okay, so the scene where they're going to move to California because he gets a job offer and it's a beautiful church, a beautiful home. And like they comment on this is everything the wife had wanted. She looks so happy. My note is it's everything the wife wants. So of course he's going to say no. And then the next note, it was like, yup.
She's got to suffer.
This whole movie.
So cruel.
It's just mean.
You know what was really great timing for me?
Huh?
Is the day before I watched this movie, I started watching The Righteous Gemstones.
Oh, nice.
On
HBO. Perfect timing.
Please update me on your watch
family.
Because we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. I've only watched the first episode.
You are in for some treats.
It's a good time.
But I was like, damn, there's a real correlation right here.
Yeah. My other, like, towards the end, the note, this is a worse ending than San Francisco.
Yeah,
but
same
it feels
idea.
So San Francisco coded, where the whole town just comes and they're singing. I will say Frederick March, his acting. So throughout the whole thing, it kind of sucked. It was like lifeless. I think this was studio system forcing him into a role, whatever. But his, we'll call it pained crying while he listens to the town singing and he plays the organ. Like his body language, his acting was very good at that point. But I was like, literally, this doesn't even feel warranted. Yeah. This does absolutely nothing other than like make it's such an empty, angry movie that the fact that you would think that ending with this scene of redemption or like have not even redemption, but fulfillment in doing the thing that you have to do ostensibly for the Lord, you know, is just like, no, it's not. None of this is what I don't know. This movie sucked.
I have a special skill where I put myself to sleep in times of hardship as a avoidance tactic.
Sure.
And when I say I was fighting for my life to stay awake during this movie,
shooting speed.
Real problem.
One, as if we're not mad enough. Do you guys remember the she ruined this good boy's life subplot? What happens to the son towards the end, which just so happens in this story, it's trumped up, they say. But oh my God, how often has that narrative been used in not so legitimate ways? I mean, it was like so patriarchal from top to bottom. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, just a nasty movie. Hate it. Let's not talk about it.
I do have one thought about biopics because of it, though. Because I do think this is the worst biopic we've seen, because it's also just the worst person who could ever get a biopic, apparently, if this is in any way accurate. But reflecting on what makes some biopics work and others not. And I'm so sorry, Abby, this one has been a tough year for you because you hate that genre. But this is
at least there was Orson Welles to be like, hey, Abby, everything you hate about biopics, let me like at least wink at that.
That's true. I didn't look at that movie that way.
Sucks. Let's do it a different. Yeah, that whole opening newsreel of Citizen Kane is like, let's list a list of achievements, and then it stops to be like, Abby, I heard you hate this shit.
I was like, okay, so this year we had the best biopic and the worst biopic, and it's kind of for me a recognition, like obviously bad biopics are just from birth to death, let's just do these events as a sequence of events chronologically, versus I think a lot of the ones that do interesting things and I've really enjoyed that have some impact are when they focus more on almost the character's flaw as the main character. Like that's what everything is kind of circling around. Like we can use The Social Network. You have Zuckerberg's insecurity with Raging Bull. You have LaMotta's self-destructive rage, The Aviator, you have Howard Hughes' OCD. There are all of these things that are like, what is this person battling with and throughout their life, and how does that change throughout their life or impact others? Versus a lot of the ones we've seen don't do that.
Yeah. I really like a biopic that like takes a very small portion of time in someone's life.
Yeah, kind of more like character studies than just like,
I love, and I don't know if we'll talk about this later. It'll take us a long time to get there. So we'll even forget that I've said this. and I don't remember if it was nominated anyway, but I love Spencer, which is the Princess Di movie starring
I saw that.
Kristen
That was
Stewart.
good. Yeah.
I haven't seen it. Yeah.
That's like just a couple of days, and it's because it's like Princess Di at a
I
Christmas
agree.
holiday.
Those little like
basically.
snapshots of history are cool movies usually.
Yeah. And they're doing all that you say, Sarah, of like what makes a strong thing, but they're just packing it into a very small, tight period of time and being like, we have 72 hours of this person's life to explore these ideas, and we can't go beyond that.
And
that's
somehow
really
you
interesting.
oftentimes will learn more about the person from that than if you try to cover 50, 60 years, you know?
Yeah. The internet exists now. I can open Wikipedia and read about literally anyone's like early life section to death.
Sure.
All right. Are we ready to dive into our next to last movie?
Yeah, I was done with that movie.
Yeah. No, again, I think we've said more words than this movie deserves, honestly, but.
No, I think 90% of the words were negative, and I think that it deserves as much as it got.
All right. So our next movie is The Maltese Falcon, which is an American noir starring Humphrey Bogart as Sam Spade, a hard-boiled private detective. Hot off the death of his business partner and determined to find out who killed him, Spade finds himself embroiled in the plot to track down a gem-encrusted bird statuette, the titular Maltese Falcon. All the detective noir hallmarks are here in this early entry of the genre. Conniving criminals, gunmen for hire, the beautiful and mysterious woman who is definitely in on it, enough brooding shadows to drown the picture frame, and the prickly protagonist at the heart of it all.
Sarah, not to put you on the spot, but this is your first noir movie, and I would love to hear kind of your first impression of that genre.
I was worried going in because obviously the letter, we looked at it as having a lot of like noir elements as well. And that one was hard to get into, but we also discovered maybe because YouTube spoiled it for me. So I was still nervous though, because I was like, is it just kind of we'll call it surface level emptiness, because so much is happening below the surface that I think is very popular in noir and Westerns, except the saving grace there is that I at least like the vibe of a noir better than the desert. So just by default, maybe it won't be as
Sarah,
bad.
known horse hater.
No.
Aesthetics are very important.
Sarah supports the running W. No, but I actually really loved this. I love a good detective sort of story and just the vibe that comes with that. And obviously this being so early, I imagine setting a lot of the groundwork for that. Like, and then the dame walked in through the door, you know, whatever sort of thing, right? It has that setup that we've seen a million times. But I loved it. Humphrey Bogart, love him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so glad that we
So
saw him
good.
in this
What a
fully
treat.
starring role finally.
Did you see, I want to believe that this is, it's probably not, but I want to believe this is a reference to him in Dark Victory. Is in his apartment, there's a bunch of pictures of racehorses.
Are there?
Maybe it's the same guy.
It's the same guy. Yeah. He just after Betty Davis died, he was like, you know what? I'm going to go solve
You can never
crimes.
trust a woman again after that.
That's so funny. But I did. Yeah, no, I really loved this. I think it was a good time, good vibes. I do also just love a mystery. And the writer of the series that this is based on is the same writer as the Thin Man series. So we had talked a little bit about him way back in that episode, Dashiell Hammett, and he worked as a private detective for a detective agency in San Francisco. So I think we gave maybe a little bit of that background, but specifically for this movie, he wrote about the main character in the 30s, saying that Sam Spade has no original. He's not based off of anyone. He's a dream man in the sense that he's what most of the private detectives I worked with would have liked to have been, and in their cockier moments thought they approached, you know? And I'm just like, yeah, he's just kind of like, because it's like, yeah, you know, you go in to become a PI and you're like, I'm going to be so cool. Probably because of these types of movies, it's even stronger.
Really, all they
some
do is
people's
take
minds where I'm
pictures
like, yeah, I'm
of
going to be
cheating
like
husbands.
Sam Spade.
My mother was a PI for a while.
That's
That's
fascinating.
cool. That's
While
really
she was
cool.
studying criminal justice, she has some good stories.
I know that this character had a ton of longevity because, like, in addition to the book and various adaptations of the Maltese Falcon, is there was also a long-running radio show from like I think it's like the mid 40s to the early 50s called The Adventures of Sam Spade.
Oh, cool.
So there was a
Was it Humphrey Bogart doing the voice or no?
no,
Probably
I
not,
think it
right?
was. I wouldn't be able to say. I wouldn't be able to name him.
Sure,
It's
sure,
not my
but not
detective
him.
radio show of choice. But yeah, there was a long-running radio show that had Sam Spade. So this is kind of a character that just kind of like lived on for a long time.
There's a classic movie guy who does the TMC channel, or used to, named Ben Mankiewicz, who is the son of one of the Mankiewicz brothers, one of which wrote Citizen Kane, many other famous movies in this time period. But in any case, one of his things is he really likes movies and stories about individuals who are really good at their trade, and just like watching them work it and work the room and execute really well. And there's almost like a comfort movie in that way, to like slide into and watch Sam Spade dance circles around everybody and be one step ahead and disarm Peter Lorre, only to have Peter Lorre
multiple times
come to and then pull the gun again.
And then the fact that he laughs about it.
Yeah,
like that's so good. That's his level of cool, that he's not even concerned with a gun in his face. So that came to my mind.
Okay, so Peter Lorre, we haven't seen him since M, but did they like put him in brown face for this? Like, what was his character's? Where was he supposed to be from? Obviously, he has like multiple passports.
Joel Cairo.
But Joel Cairo. But then, he has like 5
Eastern
passports.
But I think he has a somewhat darker complexion in general. I don't think that was.
I mean, he definitely didn't in M.
He didn't. It was black and white.
So,
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they put him in makeup for this, because I think he is supposed to be like, let's say, racially ambiguous.
Right. I think so too. I think we're maybe not supposed to know where he's from or anything, but it was cool seeing him again, even though we've only seen him in M. But yeah. So no, I had a lot of fun with this. That's all. I
love the start of this movie a lot. It gets a little talking headsy for me towards the end. It's the very prototypical drawing room murder mystery kind of thing, where you bring everyone into a room and then explain the mystery, right? So I don't necessarily mind it, but I'm not going to say that the Maltese Falcon is my favorite detective noir movie, but like it's nailing what it's setting out to do. So
it's such a
it's
forerunner.
mine because I've only seen one.
And it looks terrific. Like the use of like deep dark shadows. I think that the cinematographer on this worked on a bunch of the early monster movie.
Yeah, Universal.
The Universal horror stuff, and kind of shot and lit this in a very similar way. So you get a lot of taking advantage of the architecture to make it like look a little bit weird, or like people are standing in the dark and coming out of darker spaces and that kind of stuff. And that's really lovely.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of the cinematography, the scene where Gutman is explaining the Falcon to Sam Spade, he's waiting for him to knock out from whatever he put in his drink.
That
and
really
stuff.
long shot.
It's one take, like a 7-minute scene. That was one take.
Props to them.
Do all of that.
Yeah, really spectacular.
Yeah, really,
Green Street
really cool.
must have a theater experience.
Yeah.
And then I do love, what a classic Hollywood line. The stuff that dreams are made of.
Yeah.
I was watching it with a friend and she was like, that's what this is from?
Yeah. That almost made the whole movie for me.
Yeah.
Me too. It's just that great ending sequence. The cops come in, he's giving over the evidence, and you're seeing like he's really good at his job. And he was able to bring all of this together. You have Mary Astor crying in the elevator, about to, go to jail for all of this instead of running away together. And then, that line as he walks down the stairs and you see the elevator door close simultaneously is like, oh, good.
That's Hollywood,
good. That was a
baby.
good ending. Yeah.
I do. Going back to Humphrey Bogart's performance. So the movie starts out and Bogart's character, Sam Spade's partner, Archer, gets like killed while he's trying to protect Mary Astor's character. It's complicated. He's hired by her and he gets into a position where he gets killed. And Sam Spade takes it like pretty coolly, as we've discussed, through like the entirety of the movie, but kind of towards the very end of it, when it's revealing like exactly the mechanics of who killed Archer, when, and how, you start to see him crack a little bit. And you see kind of like some of his coolness gets stripped away. So automatically that part of it was Mary Astor's character and his being fascinated with her. And part of it was the mystery, but also part of why he's still here is because of the fact that his business partner got killed.
Right.
Yeah, his
and
partner.
That's
Bros
lovely.
before
Like I think it
hoes.
would be very easy to forget that, especially because he is such a cool, disaffected seeming character. So it's really lovely to see that pull forward, and also for Humphrey Bogart to really be able to inject that in his performance at the last minute, it feels like, but it still feels very like there's a real continuity in it, when it could have been very easy for it to be like, well, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But he does it really well.
Like, who would I be if, I let the person who killed my partner go? And it's just like, that's true. That's true.
It's good. It's good.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Are we ready to talk about our last one?
Yeah.
All right. So our final nominee that did not win Best Picture, is Suspicion, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, which follows Joan Fontaine's Lena McLeodlaw as she discovers her new husband, Johnny, played by Cary Grant, isn't everything he seems to be. Having married shortly after meeting, Johnny is revealed to be a penniless moocher and gambler who seems to have been under the impression that his wife might have access to more of her rich family's money than she actually does. Lena tries to make it work, but the lies keep piling up. When bodies start to join that pile, Lena is forced to confront her suspicion that her husband might do absolutely anything for money.
Yeah, I thought this was really kind of derivative of Rebecca. I do know that she won for this as opposed to Rebecca. And I don't know that the performance, maybe she has a little bit more opportunity to have a bit more range in this one, but I am glad she won. I really like Joan Fontaine a lot. Yeah.
She was good enough, and we really loved her performance in Rebecca last year, so we should give it to her.
That's what I was thinking.
There's a lot in here that I think she does a great job, but I don't necessarily think it is better than her Rebecca performance.
Agree.
Yeah. And what the fuck is it with Cary Grant playing pieces of shit? I mean, my whole image of him has been like destroyed in this experience because I never watched him in stuff this far back, but he always plays this dilettante. But this movie would have been so much more interesting if he actually shoved her out of the car and she went down like a rag doll screaming like
lay it on us, because I know I can already hear that you've done the research.
So it's based on a book. All right, you guys. And in this book, Johnny literally, he does kill her in the end. But you know the scene where he brings the milk in and it's like radioactively glowing because they put a battery on it to bring attention to it. So I was like, girl, that's radioactive. Do not drink it. But you know, it's unclear if it is or not. So in the book, by this point, she has put it all together that like he is trying to kill me. He was involved in all of these other things, but I love him so much that fuck it, I'm going to drink this poison milk. And they wanted the ending of this to be, she has like written a letter to her mom being like, hey, pretty sure Johnny's going to poison me. Writes it in the letter, gives it to him and is like, can you mail this? Her drinking the milk and then him taking the letter that would incriminate him to the mailbox. So then it's just like, okay, hopefully he actually gets caught. At least like he doesn't know that she had figured everything out. So they kind of toyed with different endings. They also toyed with her being shoved out of the car, like things that actually confirm that she was right about all of her suspicions and paranoia. But it didn't play well with audiences or with
fucking peasants.
or with obviously Hays Code and some of the producers, mostly because they wanted to protect Cary Grant's image.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Which is wild because like Cary Grant is so good in this as being like the moments where he drops the goofball act and like becomes really
he
grim
turned
and
on a
dark
dime.
and like empty
When
behind
she
his
almost
eyes.
ruined his real estate deal, I was like, whoa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then when he's following her up the stairs and like staying eye to eye with her the entire time as she walks, just
amazing.
Like, oh, it's so good. And then any sequence where she's trying to talk to the well-meaning kind of dumb partner for the real Beaky. And then you see the door open and he's standing there, like anything like that, which is very like kind of Hitchcock. Now they're there. And what did they hear? What do they know? And it's kind of like menacing. He did such a good job.
Yeah. The scene where Beaky like starts to choke and he just stands there with his head tipped slightly to the side, watching, waiting to see if his friend dies. Like incredible performance. It's amazing. It made me wish, I was like, it's a real shame that he doesn't kill people because it would have been like a defining performance for Cary Grant. And I feel like because the end really upends all of that,
the whole thing.
Yeah, the ending ruined it.
Sucks. I was thinking to myself, oh, I really would have loved to see Cary Grant play a murderer in a movie because he would have been good at it. And then I'm like, I literally just watched a movie where he did that, but the end ruined it for him.
If they had even left the end more ambiguous, whether he was lying to her again or not, like if they made it clear that she's choosing to believe it because she's choosing, she doesn't want to believe it, I would have accepted even that. But no, they just totally whiffed the ending. And apparently like RKO executives had initially after filming had any scenes where Cary Grant appeared menacing to be just like fully taken from the movie. So the movie was only 55 minutes long. Like it was under an hour once they did that. So later the scenes were restored, but that's because like Hitchcock did the same thing that he did in Rebecca to avoid David O. Selznick messing with the final cut of the movie, where he would do a lot of in-camera editing. So you really couldn't edit them together properly without it. But that's the level of like protect Cary Grant that they were at. And it's like, but why? He was so good in this.
And don't get me wrong, when I said before my image of him has been ruined, I'm not saying he was a bad performance. It's just I'm used to him being more fun-loving later. So it's been shocking to see something like this. But I agree, he's really great in this.
Could have been so good.
It could have been so good because it also looks spectacular. Like I don't think it's as visually stunning in terms of the architecture, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
as
I like Rebecca
where
better.
there's some stunning images in Rebecca, but the way that they use darkness is very cool. There's so many shots in this that have the frame for window panes. Like light is allegedly, because it's all on a set, but like light is coming through a window that is off screen, but it's really like the shadow of the bars of the window pane is being cast onto the scene. So you just see these bars across the scene that have a real cage-like effect on the movie. There's some terrific things happening with how the movie is lit and framed that really is supporting like that concept of Lena's increasing paranoia and also like his increasing menace. So I'd chop off the last 10 minutes of this movie and have it end with her drinking poison milk. It would have been terrific.
Agree. Shout out to probably the best leitmotif we've seen since Fritz Lang's M, which used Hall of the Mountain King. This one used the Johann Strauss waltz, where every time that she was happy and felt like, oh, actually I'm safe and I'm just being crazy, you would hear more of that waltz in its normal, like happy form, or it would be played directly in the film itself. Like he played a record at one point, that sort of thing. But then at any points where she's kind of becoming suspicious of him, there's this very low threatening minor key version of the waltz that is used throughout the movie. He's whistling it at one point too. I think at one point, like it's just good, like really good use of that leitmotif, that music throughout as a way to reflect her inner feelings of safety or trust with Johnny, and how easily he can turn it around. Like she's terrified of him and then he's just like, oh no, I was just doing a thing. And she's like, oh, thank God he was just doing a thing, because he's so charismatic.
Impressive that you picked up on that with it being the last one in your binge yesterday.
Yeah, I'm very impressed.
But no, I'm definitely enjoying what I've seen of Hitchcock. Really wish that they had not pulled back in the end and could have really leaned into all of the menacing stuff, because then it ruins because the whole time I didn't know anything about this movie
again.
So,
there's no replay value.
Yes.
Yeah. There's absolutely no replay value now, because it's all no stakes.
It still was a fun ride, but for what? Especially because had he really been that manipulative, then the additional layer of even fooling the woman who writes all about like serial killers and murders and stuff, not being able to clock him, would even be additionally like, damn, this dude, he's good.
You know what I thought was cool? Side note, when they're at the dinner there, that author, there's another woman sat at the table who's very masculinely dressed. Are we supposed to assume that they're a couple?
I have no idea.
The author and that other one?
Yeah, the woman who's in like a suit
there for
instead
people
of a dress.
who notice it. I like to think.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
Well, do we have anything else to say about Suspicion?
No, just stand by your man. That's the theme this year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
My God.
Oof.
Because he'll never kill you. No. We changed that ending because this is America. Time to go to war.
Meanwhile, they let Betty Davis basically kill her husband.
Which is why Willie and Betty rock.
Very similar scene where she watches him die.
Struggle and die. Yeah.
That's them dames. Sam Spade knew to look out for him, but you can trust a man.
Wait, so which movie were you saying Abby could be the bargain bin with Blossoms and Dust? Was it One Foot in Heaven?
No. For Sergeant York, I think other movie that we pair this with, and this is brutal, but I think this makes Sergeant York the better movie of the 2-pack, is we pair it with One Foot in Heaven.
Yeah, I could see that.
God, just
I could see
kill me at that point.
Well, are we ready to move on and watch the Best Picture winner of this year. How green?
It better be
was
fucking
my
good. That's
valley?
all I'm saying.
John Ford, he's hit or miss. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see.
Welcome back, listeners, to Lights, Camera, Accolade. I hope you're feeling ready for a little play-by-play description of this year's Best Picture Oscar winner, How Green Was My Valley? The Morgans are a humble, close-knit family that live and work in a picturesque working-class coal mining village situated in the majestic rolling hills of Wales. It's the late Victorian era, that is to say sometime in the 1890s or maybe even the 1880s. Life appears simple but dignified in this seemingly isolated community where everyone knows their neighbor and talk travels fast. Father and Mother Morgan have a large brood of children, 6 sons and a beautiful young daughter named Angharad. Each day is much like the last. Father Morgan marches up to the mine that overlooks the village with his 5 elder adult sons to work a fresh shift down below in the shaft. Though the labor is extremely hazardous and the compensation modest, it's enough for the families that populate the town to eke out a living. At home, Mother Morgan and Angharad carry out the considerable daily domestic duties while their menfolk toil. The Morgans' youngest son, the boy Hugh, is too young for the mines, and he spends his time daydreaming about the future. When the mine lets out each day, an army of relieved and exhausted Welshmen march, soot-covered and singing joyfully in unison, to their respective homes. When Father Morgan and his large adult sons arrive to their home, they diligently deposit their small wages in proud Mother Morgan's apron pouch, before it's shortly afterward moved to the family's collective lockbox for Father Morgan to allocate to the children proportionally after the household expenses are covered each week. The men then wash their dirty bodies in the backyard before sitting down to a traditional meal in their home's dining room. One gets the feeling that this simple lifestyle among the Welsh miners has been the way of things for many generations, and it's difficult to imagine those ways ever changing. Alas, the first major development in our story is the arrival to town of one Mr. Griffith, an educated and charismatic preacher from outside the community. Griffith's thoughtful and eloquent sermons make a strong impression on the community, and the Morgans are thrilled when the newcomer honors them by attending the joyful wedding of one of their elder sons, Ivor, to the youngest son Hugh's longtime crush, Bronwyn. Unsurprisingly, the wedding reception is song-filled, and Griffith continues to impress his new parishioners, particularly the lovely Angharad, who before long develops a crush on him. Unfortunately, the good times don't last, as the Morgans are soon faced with their first major challenge. The wealthy Evans family, the owners of the mine that employ the men of the town, opt to decrease wages in order to remain profitable in an increasingly competitive and large market. Obviously, this causes hardship among the families in the community. When Father Morgan, an influential veteran worker at the mine in his own right, raises concerns with management about the change, he's unofficially penalized for it when the bosses assign him unpleasant new work duties. The Morgan boys are outraged both by this disrespect shown to their family patriarch and by the expectation that the town's workers will be expected to work harder for less now. At an uncharacteristically tense family dinner, Father Morgan's sons criticize him for not standing up for himself. They express their hope to help organize a labor union among the mine workers in order to collectively bargain for better wages. Outraged at this socialistic impulse, Father Morgan strongly disagrees with this strategy, but the boys hold their ground and opt to leave the family household for the time being. Before long, they're leading a strike among the town's workers, which shuts down the mine and forces everyone to tighten their belts even further. Father Morgan is bullied by the striking workers over his refusal to participate in their labor action. They even go so far as to throw a brick through his window, prompting a heartbroken Mother Morgan to pay a visit to the strikers' camp one cold, wintry evening, with young Hugh by her side to support her. There, Mother Morgan gives an impassioned plea on behalf of her husband and the community to join together as one and support each other. Having seemingly moved some of the listeners, Mother Morgan and Hugh carefully make their way back into town. On a small footbridge, they slip and fall into a frigid ice pond and are only narrowly saved by the workers who hear their cries. Both Mother Morgan and young Hugh are seriously injured and begin a long road to recovery. In Hugh's case, the doctor is not sure the boy will ever walk again. The caring Mr. Griffith pays a visit to Hugh and lends him a slew of books about adventure. He lifts the invalid boy's spirits and helps him to set the goal to walk again. The striking workers are overcome with guilt over the woman and the boy's injuries from that fateful night. They gather in front of the Morgan home and warmly welcome Father Morgan back into their fold. As the strike drags on, the progressive-minded Mr. Griffith bucks the town's established authorities by endorsing the striking workers' action, winning him the respect of the next generation, including Angharad, who he's begun to take a romantic interest in as well. The strike ends in victory for the workers. It's a bittersweet victory, however, as the mine's owners use the wage increases as a pretext to lay off a number of miners, including 2 of the Morgans' own sons. These young men opt to leave their family at this point to seek new opportunities in the United States. Another Morgan brother gets the opportunity to lead a choir of Welsh singers for Queen Victoria in London, and he leaves for greener pastures. Thankfully, around this time, young Hugh finally regains his ability to walk again. He celebrates the breakthrough with the ever-supportive Mr. Griffith in the hills overlooking the sprawling green valley the town calls home. The older man imparts wisdom on an excited Hugh. Around this time, Griffith's relationship to Hugh's older sister becomes closer as the two express the feelings they have for one another. Sadly, their love is aborted before it can even get off the ground when family duty pulls Angharad into another matrimonial direction. It seems the young woman's good looks and cheerful disposition caught the eye of the wealthy Evans family heir, and he expresses an interest in marrying her. Unwilling to let slip this opportunity for her family, a crestfallen Angharad agrees to this marriage and soon leaves the family for South Africa with her new husband. Another link in the family chain is broken, and Griffith is left hollowed by the loss. On a positive note, Father Morgan soon saves enough money for his youngest boy, Hugh, to attend a well-funded national school. His hope is that the bright child's curious mind will flourish in this new environment, and that Hugh will gain skills and knowledge that afford him greater opportunities in life. But school is a difficult adjustment for Hugh. At first, he is relentlessly bullied by his classmates over his worn clothing and humble origins. When his older brothers and the town's resident badass, the amateur boxer and drunkard, Dai Bondo, teach Hugh how to defend himself from bullies, the boy is able to finally earn the respect of his peers by holding his own in a fight. Even so, Hugh's bigoted and sadistic teacher still ridicules and beats him in front of the class. Eventually, Dai Bondo's patience wears thin, and he arrives in person at Hugh's school to assault the wretched teacher in front of all of his cheering students. Things seem to be looking up for the Morgans and their town when tragedy strikes. Hugh's elder brother Ivor is killed in a mine accident, shattering his parents and leaving his young, pregnant wife Bronwyn a widow. Compounding the hardship for Father Morgan is Hugh's subsequent decision to abandon his education, move in with his lonesome sister-in-law and baby nephew, and take up work in the town mine. Challenges mount as Hugh's remaining elder brothers are let go by the increasingly stingy mine owners. Like the earlier laid-off siblings, these young men decide to leave their home and seek out new work in the city. It isn't long before a newfound controversy strikes the Morgans. Angharad's marriage to her wealthy, philandering husband is on the rocks, and unsavory rumors begin to spread through the town that the sad wife has left South Africa and returned home to take up with Mr. Griffith, the object of her unrealized affection from years before.
Greatly angered by the baseless gossip and proposals to excommunicate Angharad from the church, Griffith defends he and the wrongly accused woman's integrity to the prominent members of the community at a town meeting. The skilled orator accurately highlights the hypocrisy and ignorance of focusing on Christian dogma when it comes to sin and punishment, while ignoring Christ's much more important teachings on acceptance and love. Exasperated over how low the community seems to have sunken, the preacher vows to leave the town once and for all. But before he can, there's another accident in the mine. Alarm bells blare, and desperate families rush to the opening of the shaft to see who's been hurt or worse. To Mother Morgan and Harad and Hugh's shock and dismay, Father Morgan is nowhere to be found. Brave Hugh, kind Griffith, and the now blind Daibondo volunteer to descend into the damaged mine at great risk to themselves. Deep within, Hugh eventually comes upon his father, wedged under a collapsed sheet of rock. The boy has just enough time to hold the loving Morgan patriarch in his arms and exchange words before the old man is overtaken by his mortal wounds. We shortly see Griffith and Hugh ascend out of the mine with Father Morgan's body, as the narration of an imagined elderly Hugh completes a somber but nostalgic tale of just how bright and lively the community of his youth was before the march of time had its way with it, as it does all things. Okay, ladies, let's hear it. What did you think of this film?
I think, other than the influence of William Randolph Hearst, I can definitely see why this movie would win this year over Citizen Kane, because I think from the pool of movies that we saw, Hollywood and the American public were leaning so heavily into warmth and family and what it means to be American, but in this case Welsh, but it's still like small town community struggling with change, you know, so it's like recognizable in their contemporary world. So I get it. And I think this movie does that sort of warmth and community better than some of the other ones this year. In a way, it's almost like the opposite of Citizen Kane, which specifically lacked that. Yeah. So I see that. And I do think it was a really good movie. And I loved the unionization efforts, and like conversations around labor were so important at this time in America as well. And like how far we've come or not come is like kind of depressing. And then I loved the school scenes with Hugh. In those scenes, I was like truly rooting for him, which I don't know if I was really rooting for any other character in anything else we saw this year that I can think of. So liked that. So I can see it. I enjoyed it. I think it was really solid, but so much of it I think was just centered around the family, and then that family through these big changes getting broken up and losing that way of life. So still processing, but I see it, you know, why it was important this year.
John Ford is really excellent at getting me to care about things that I ordinarily wouldn't give a shit about. This is very much not the kind of movie that is typically going to like do anything for Abby. Do it. It's not going to do anything for me. It's very like kind of episodic. There's a undercurrent running through it, right? In terms of this concept of like memory and how this family breaks apart, and how that's also reflected in kind of the land. And like we know Hugh, the boy, he's telling us the story as he's leaving the valley. So we know ultimately like the entire family leaves. Yeah. But so much of this is that homey domesticity that is not usually my cup of tea. But John Ford manages to like shoot it in such a way that it's like the images are gorgeous and beautiful, and very easily so, in the sense of like Citizen Kane, I feel like, is taking a lot of risks and kind of propelling the medium forward. And this is very confident and sure of itself, but is not necessarily like risky in any way, shape, or form, down to like the script, right? But still, there's a good sense of sentiment. I can't help but compare this in terms of the soul of the movie, I guess, kind of the community and faith aspects of this movie compared to One Foot in Heaven, which, whereas that movie is just such a mean and cruel movie at the very like heart of it, is this has so much more like humanity and that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's a great comparison. This is like the other side of that coin. This is a well-executed version of that nostalgic look at, shall we say, traditional lifestyles, in this case, in Wales in the late 19th century. But I have to tell you, the soul that I was missing in Citizen Kane was bleeding out of this one, in my opinion. And I'm just a sucker for this stuff. It feels like it was like designed for me because it had the socialist organizing element.
Yeah.
It had the boys coming of age, passage of time. It had Wales, which is a beautiful region of the UK that I'm a bit of an Anglophile about. It had discussions of theology, you know? I mean, I adore this movie. I think it was one of my favorites that we've watched so far. As you say, Ford is an expert with the camera, in particular with lighting, but there's just like a love undergirding this movie. I guess you could look at it with an insidious eye that it's presenting this arguably very patriarchal social system in this context as kind of idyllic. Everyone has their place, but they flourish within their place. And there's kind of an unspoken ability to kind of move out of your place in order to advocate for each other. But ultimately, family is most important. Community is most important. It's just so alien to the time period that we are living in and my lived experience that it's really interesting to watch. And yeah, I thought it was cool that discussion of how religion can be used in progressive ways versus reactionary ways, epitomized by Pastor Griffin and his kind of progressive take on it versus some of the more conservative elements was really interesting. There's so much to unpack here. I'm going to be thinking about this movie a lot, frankly.
It's nice. And I think John Ford won Best Director for this as well. I think it was his third win. I think it is deserved. I think kind of like you guys are saying, he just has a masterful way of framing things. The movie just feels complete and beautiful without drawing your attention away from what's going on screen. It is just he was good. John Ford was definitely good at what he did.
He knew
can make
what
a
he was
movie.
doing. Weird.
I mentioned it while we were watching. I'm just shocked by some of the transgressive and, in my view, so the fact that John Ford, who's famously a very curmudgeonly kind of later Republican man, although he did stand up for somebody during the HUAC stuff. But so he's kind of a complicated guy. But to see him deal with some of these themes in such an honest way, and the political aspect is just one part of the movie. But I was just very impressed by that and the way it ties into those other arguments about the importance of empathy and community and this shared interest among these family members and neighbors. I love seeing that. This reminded me a lot of The Grapes of Wrath, but whereas The Grapes of Wrath, I was like clutching my chest the whole time, like, oh my God. This was a little bit more cozy, a little bit more, tragedy does unfold, very tragic ending, but ultimately I feel very inspired by what I saw.
Yeah. And in this one too, because of that humanizing and focusing on the family as they were as a unit before all of the things start separating them.
Yeah.
It just made it easier too for me to like really be invested in what happens to the family from start to finish. Even the things that would seem minor, like the sons moving to America or, things like that, where it's like, those aren't big tragedies, but this movie makes you feel sad about them because you know how impactful that is for them, that change. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then since you mentioned Wales, I do have to ruin some movie magic.
Oh no, where was it filmed?
It was filmed on a set, Jake.
It looked like Wales. Come on.
No, but this is kind of the crazy impressive part is that it took, I think it was over like 150 builders 6 months to build this set. And it cost
they built the entire fucking village.
They literally, it was modeled off of two specific towns in Wales. And I'm not even going to begin to say their names because they just, it's
Welsh
crazy. What a wild language. But it cost $110,000 in those dollars of 1941 to build the entire thing. And they even brought over huge blocks of coal, which themselves weighed over a ton a piece to make the construction of the mines. And I'm like, at a certain point, you think it would be easier to just go film on location.
Just go there.
Sounds like a proto James Cameron, just like moving mountains just to like prove a point.
Who is the... Oh, it's David Fincher is who I'm thinking of, where it's like he'll shoot stuff, but then it's like the background gets completely CGI'd and that kind of thing. So even though they're shooting on location outside, like that's part of why that Mindhunter show was so expensive and Netflix canceled it. I mean, Netflix is going to cancel anything anyway.
Idea.
But yeah,
like
part of
that
it
show.
is he's really big into like digitally retouching stuff. So maybe it's a control thing. John Ford, like, we got to film on a set so that I can make it like exactly like how I want it to be.
It honestly might be. It might be because, you know, that scene where Maureen O'Hara's veil is just being blown around in the wind and going straight up. So that everyone was like, oh my God, you got so lucky with the wind to be able to capture those scenes. And he was like, no, it was a giant fan. Like, this was planned. I wanted it to look a certain way. So yeah, the set, that might be a control thing.
It's such an appreciation for the practical abilities of filmmakers at this time, because, you know, to me, that is so much more impressive. I mean, it's like old hat to say at this point than just making everything on the computer. You know, I don't know. I love the idea of these kind of grandiose schemes and you know, maybe a little bit overboard, but in my mind, it really pays off when you watch it.
Yeah. And I don't mind like the mix of things, either modern or in the past, because obviously at this time there were matte paintings, there was painting on the, you know, a lot of ways to not all be like practical effects the way we're thinking of, and then CGI replaced a lot of that. Yeah, good versions of that and bad versions. But anyway, back to how green was my valley.
We don't know. Ultimately, we have to say we do not know how green the valley was, because it was in fact in black and white. However, he says this in his narration. I don't know that we would know because we're not from that context, but apparently over time, those communities did change and did lose their green as a result of that mining. Yeah. And there was that word slag that he kept using. That was accumulated residue from their mining activities that ultimately changed the landscape there. So that's just another example of the loss or the change over the course of that century into the 20th century for those communities.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do have a fun fact about the author. So Richard Llewellyn initially claimed that the book was essentially kind of his own life and his family history, but apparently that was false. And they proved that after he died.
I love a liar.
Yeah. He was a big old liar.
So
like, he was Welsh, but he like spent no time in Wales. He did like go to local Welsh towns and talk to mining families, but this man just bold-faced was like, yep, this is my family's story. And everyone was like, cool, we don't have the internet, so we're just gonna believe you. I love it.
Oh man, I wish I was alive in those times. God.
Yeah, it's dangerous times. Could say anything.
I don't want to cinema sends this script, but I'm very confused about, and maybe it's because we're seeing it from Hugh's point of view, but his sister getting married to the owner of the mining
Mr.
business.
Monopoly Jr.
Yeah, Mr. Monopoly Jr. And I'm like, this seems to do nothing of benefit for anyone.
Yeah, except her, because
we don't know if maybe the family was put on like a look, because if you think about it, they kept losing sons, so it would have been more difficult to maintain that household. So maybe,
but their sons also got fired. So I don't know.
So it wasn't like the benefit of proximity to the family or anything like that.
And like maybe I'm just not really understanding kind of like the social obligation, but I would have anticipated that even if it wasn't an official support thing, because essentially it's this woman joining this household, but it's like surely her mother goes to live with her after her husband dies and that kind of thing, where I'm like, I don't really understand the exact mechanics of how that works or why that happened, other than to be like, serve the story, like break up the relationship between her and the pastor, or like maybe that the only time that owning class, essentially like the owners of the mine, will deign to like deal with you directly because they didn't deal with the father when it was a matter of business. It was literally only to like acquire your daughter.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. One would think the brothers would have at least been made like overseers in the office above the mine, you know, at that point. But
or like if everyone else got fired, they'd be protected,
or something.
You know,
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right there. I mean,
that's true.
There's a little bit of a logic break there, but I think in service of the story that it's telling, I'm willing to look the other way. Maybe I will tell you, they got fired after their marriage started breaking up. There you go. I just defended it.
That is true.
Maybe they got fired because their marriage. There you go. Blame
retaliatory, but not just for the union.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what we're overlooking that I just realized?
What?
About choosing to shoot on set versus on location. And we should have realized it's the fucking war.
Oh, true.
You're probably shooting
that'll
over
do it.
like whales or anything.
Now you feel like an asshole.
Well, yeah.
Keep trying to come at this movie. We will defend it. I will defend it.
I mean, I was fine with the set. I was more impressed by the set. I just know you had your heart set on it being real.
Well, it was such a good
but
job.
no,
It's
this makes sense,
better
yeah.
than real whales.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who wants to get shot?
Yeah, because the mines ruined all of the cute little
Yeah.
Welsh villages, apparently. So.
That's also true. Those hills were already black. That like the
Yeah.
valley had already been stripped of all its green in Wales.
That's true. Oof.
I do think that we talk a lot about these like homey domestic movies kind of minimizing or simplifying the role of women in them. And the women all have a tendency to, in like, you know, a Sergeant York and that kind of thing, kind of just be, or even Here Comes Mr. Jordan, even in Here Comes Mr. Jordan, like where the love interest is basically woman. So it's very easy to kind of flatten those roles or just have them feel like placeholders. But it is terrific to me how none of these women in this movie are breaking out of like what is expected of a woman in their social class or in their village or in their situation or anything like that. But they still are really well characterized. They're really excellently played. They feel like people and they're not just, you know, Gosh and Blur, Vaseline on the lens, beautiful woman. Even Braun, who is like the object of desire for little Hugh, feels like an actual person, which is great.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So it's nice to see that happen here and to have them feel real. And I think we saw glimmers of that from Ford before, like in The Informant. I love the way the mother and the daughter try to intervene to stop the killing at one point. And, you know, I think he's a pretty deep guy.
Stagecoach, too.
Yeah,
Is like
that's
a big example of that. Yeah.
For a Nixon supporter, pretty woke.
I know.
I never thought I'd say that.
That is kind of crazy that John Ford made this movie and then ended up a Republican. It's crazy.
Well,
People
it's
have
like
layers,
Eisenhower in the 50s was putting out ads to unions, like the Republican Party is the party of unions. Yeah. So it was just a totally before the 70s.
But I guess from a
it's totally
politician,
different.
you kind of also expect them to be trying to cater to whichever way the wind is blowing versus someone who's more in like a creative field. It's just usually a little more surprising, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I do know the anecdote somewhat, and people can fact check me later, but there was some type of hearing where a prominent filmmaker was being called out for being a communist. I can't remember, but it was like looking real bad for the person. And John Ford stood up and he's like, look, you guys know I'm not a very political person, but what we're doing here is wrong. This is out of control. This is a good man who I've worked with and who I know personally, and this has to stop. So, I mean, take that for what it is, but he had at least some moral compass on some level.
Sure. I bet. I mean, we'll almost definitely get to
I'm
it
sure we'll
once
run
we're in
into
the
it.
actual HUAC. So let that be a cliffhanger for our listeners.
What do we know? What years was HUAC happening? How far away?
I
from
think
that?
47 is
it's
when
right
it
after
started.
the war. Because they wanted
so it was
to wipe
biggest
away
in the
everything that had
50s.
happened.
Like,
Sure.
yeah, they're like, okay, now that the war is over, let's undo whatever progress that we had to acquiesce to get to this point.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I think it starts late 40s, but throughout the 50s is when it's like really, really, really big, I believe. But we're going to start seeing maybe some of our faves being knocked off their
Picking
pedestals.
sides.
Maybe we should have some sort of like bracket or something, but I don't know.
Good ones and the bad ones.
Well, is there anything else about this movie?
Oh, Daibondo.
Oh, Daibondo. Yeah, we
Daibondo.
gotta talk about Daibondo. Daibondo. Do you know he's the only actual Welsh person in this movie?
Oh, really?
He's
I'm
the
not
actual only
surprised.
Welsh actor. Yeah, and I
not
was
shocking.
like, he was just playing himself,
So
probably.
Daibondo is so cool at the end when there's the last accident that tragically kills the father. They're trying to find people who are brave enough to go down and serve as rescuers, which that's like, I can't imagine that level of bravery. Shit's still falling down and whatnot. Daibondo is blind because he's been in so many fights that he's like, I'll go. And then Hugh comes up and is like, I'll go with you, Dai. And so they're kind of like a Mondo, what's in Mad Max Thunderdome, the big guy and the little guy. It's kind of like that. But Daibondo, I mean, that name, he sounds like he's from science
He was a
fiction.
hero. Yeah.
I will say one other thing. The power of a good script and a good director. Compare Walter Pidgeon, who plays the pastor in this,
Blossom.
to his performance in Blossoms in the Dust.
Oh my God.
A completely different person, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I was kind of nervous when I saw that it was him because I was thinking of that movie. I'm like, he didn't really do it for me. But boy, does he knock it out of the park on this. And he's got a real great voice. That whole monologue at the end in the church, fantastic. I kind of want to watch it again. I might watch it this afternoon.
It was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Such a difference in that direction.
It makes me a little bit, because I had seen that we had more Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon movies coming up, and I was like, ugh. But this gives me a little bit of hope.
It's not their fault.
Yeah, no, not their fault. And because I had liked her a lot in Goodbye, Mr. Chips. So seeing
that was
her
the one thing you
that.
did like about Chips.
Yeah, it's true. Standing by it. And Blossoms in the Dust with her, I was like, oh, terrible. Was this a one-off? But I guess we'll see. But I'm now marginally more optimistic about watching a bunch of those.
Me too. I think, yes, directing, but so much of it comes down to writing, because if you remember, William Wyler directed Jezebel, and like Henry Fonda, it's not that he had a bad performance necessarily, but
not the right role
didn't
for
do
him.
anything for it. Yeah, versus in Grapes of Wrath, which was a role, one, that was well written, and two, that clearly resonated with his own beliefs. I was just like, oh my God, this is a whole other person. So now I am learning, though, is like, okay, we've seen some lows from actors that we really love and some highs that are surprising, that you're like, oh, I thought this person wasn't really anything special. So I've kind of just learned that at this time period, and this probably has a lot to do with the studio system, where people aren't really picking the roles that really resonate with them. They're just kind of being put into the movies that make the most sense for the studio. Is that we are going to see a much wider breadth of like performances and fantastic performances from the same people. Just
like
based
that,
on, what it is. I kind of do too. You kind of see the range, but it makes it so I don't know what to expect necessarily if I'm going into a movie blind, or I'm like, is this going to be a good one or a bad one? Like Frederick March, hated him in the last movie.
Some of them don't miss, like Claude. He has never missed in any movie. So your theory is mostly true, but there are still some heroes.
I think it just goes to show what a miracle any movie is. Like the fact that we managed, there's so many people involved. There are so many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, like from the people in front of the camera to the people behind the line on the crew to all the people financing it and making all the weird studio decisions, that it's frankly miraculous any movie gets made, much less a good one. So, wow, what a treat to see a good movie occasionally.
Yeah, truly.
That's a very humble and true way to put it.
All right, that was my last thought.
All right.
That was a good thought. Okay, as far as our recommendations go for this year, I'm pulling up the list, but who wants to go first?
All right. So, and you guys know I have my style. I give a little diss or prop to each movie. Sergeant York, if you're an idiot, you'll like this movie. Rah, rah, America, let's go to war. At least it's better than shoveling shit all day. That's basically Sergeant York. Good luck if you enjoy that movie and life. Blossoms in the Dust. This was a very sexist movie, I felt. As we learned, as I mentioned before from Kitty Foyle, it is important to let women, plural, make their own decisions and figure out what they want to do in life. You cannot be continually putting babies in their laps and saying, this is the only thing that'll make you happy. And that's what they did to that poor Greer Garson, Chips's wife, in Blossoms in the Dust.
I love that we don't know the name of Chips's wife as a character.
Look, there's too many other things to remember from Chips.
It's true. It makes me laugh.
Look, it's a title of honor.
Mrs. Chips.
I mean,
you're not wrong.
I would rather be known as Chips's wife than Jake Bolton. I would feel honored. Anyway, at least she makes the most.
You better don't cut that, Sarah.
At least she makes the most of it by saving orphans. Here Comes Mr. Jordan. Boy, I loved Here Comes Mr. Jordan. I just love watching Claude do his thing. He's so commanding. He's this gorgeous little manlet. I don't really know like religion, the afterlife, all that shit. It was interesting, but it was funny mostly. And it was just cool to see Claude in such a position. And I just loved it. It made me believe in movies and life again, as I posted that night after I watched it. The Little
Foxes I thought was cool. It's like racist succession. Like I said, the beginning drags, but once the siblings get into their conniving and Betty's able to really embrace her, I don't want to say evil, but complex and menacing in many ways character. I really enjoyed that movie. And I had a little critique of, financial capitalism and whatnot. That was cool. Weiler's always a pretty thoughtful filmmaker. Citizen Kane, like I said, sky high expectations, mostly met, especially from an aesthetic perspective. Beautiful film, innovative, feels super ahead of its time. It's just, for me, I'm a little bit more of a red-blooded guy, a little bit more of a passionate guy. And like I said, when we were talking about it, I can understand in the time that exploration of male trauma and close-offedness emotionally was probably kind of groundbreaking. But for me, it felt derivative because we're in the 21st century and I needed to see more of him. I needed to know more. But like we said, maybe that's the point. Hold Back the Dawn. Loved that. Love Charles Boyer. Love Olivia de Havilland. They're so cute together. This is a great romance. Very timely considering the setting and the themes of immigration. And I am really just getting into the Olivia de Havilland, Joan Fontaine rivalry. And this is a good one in Olivia's corner with her performance here. One Foot in Heaven was my least favorite movie that we've watched so far. I'm even counting that one that I had like an existential dread crisis in the middle of.
Our Town.
Yeah, where I was like, is this a movie? Am I alive? That was not as bad as this hateful, mean, as Abby said so correctly, mean piece of shit. Frederick March, stop letting yourself be tortured. Go to a different studio. Retire. We know you can do better than this. Maltese Falcon, so important as a early noir film, setting the standard. All the trappings are there. Bogart is, owning and chewing through every scene he is in. Nice to see our little creepy friend from M in this one having a more comedic role. It's fun. It's a fun movie. Breezes by. Liked Maltese Falcon a lot. Suspicion, did not care for it as much as Rebecca. Felt a little bit derivative of that from last year. Same director, Hitchcock. He's doing his whole thing of the wife, Joan Fontaine, suspicioning her husband and getting paranoid, and ultimately they cop out in the end and they do not make him a killer, which kind of undercuts the stakes the whole movie. Having said that, great performances from both the leads in Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine, so maybe worth it for that reason alone. I don't know if I did actual recommendations for each one, but you can draw your own conclusions based on that.
What about How Green Was My Valley?
I cannot recommend it enough if that wasn't clear earlier in my talking about it. I loved How Green Was My Valley. Beautiful, beautiful, heartfelt film.
All right, Abby.
I'm going to go with Citizen Kane, The Maltese Falcon, and How Green Was My Valley, with special mention for The Little Foxes, because I think the scripting and performances is really excellent, but I don't think it's the best Weiler movie we've watched. And Suspicion, because I love Cary Grant's performance in it. Just like turn it off 10 minutes before it ends.
Yeah.
Because he's so good in it.
So good.
Very fair. Very fair. That was generous for you. Sometimes you can be more strict in your largesse.
Yeah, I was expecting like Citizen Kane, maybe Maltese Falcon, and maybe How Green Was My Valley.
Yeah, and then don't watch any of these other movies.
God, no, I can agree with you on that front. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
oh, wait, except Mr. Jordan. Don't forget Mr.
You agreed. It's too late. You can't take your agreeing away. Okay, for me, Sergeant York is a hard no. I think there is something interesting about maybe that man's life and his journey, but it was not that movie. Blossoms in the Dust, basically the same thing, except for Edna and her journey instead. So that's also a no. Here Comes Mr. Jordan. I think it was fun. It definitely, I agree with Abby, it could have been better. I wouldn't say like fully wasted, but kind of wasted a really fun and good premise. But I do still think it's like fun enough to watch if you're looking for like an extra pickup for something. So light recommendation there. Little Foxes, I would recommend. Agree with Jake where the first half is a little bit slow, but once it really picks up and gets into like the ugliness of the family, it gets really, really good. Great critique of greed and capitalism and Southern aristocracy. So that was a good one. Citizen Kane, Very, very strong recommendation. I think it lives up to the hype around it, and it's doing so many interesting things visually. And I just really also liked the puzzle piecing together of this man's kind of empty life at the end of the day. Hold Back the Dawn, I'm also going to say strong yes to that. If you're looking for like a romantic comedy drama, like Jake said, it's for the immigration, it feels relevant. But I had such fun with this one, and I was rooting for them to get together, which doesn't always happen in these types of, movies, especially in this era. So like that one. One Foot in Heaven, no. I thought I wouldn't recommend a movie less than Sergeant York this year, but then I watched One Foot in Heaven and I was like, oh man, just forget we've ever even talked about it. Such a mean-spirited movie. Maltese Falcon, I'm a baby when it comes to noir, so I have a solid recommendation for that one. I think it was fun, really good, great to see what the fuss about Humphrey Bogart is all about. Love the vibe and liked the mystery, so that was a really fun one. Suspicion, I wish they hadn't ruined it at the end. Like, I was so ready for this to be just another strong recommendation. Cary Grant menacing. If you somehow didn't know anything about the movie, which you wouldn't if you've listened, or which you do if you, whatever, you know too much if you listen to this episode. And so it's probably not even worth watching.
Look up clips of Cary Grant being ominous.
Yeah, exactly. Just look up some of the cool clips and stuff and just know that it could have been better. How Green Was My Valley, I would also recommend. I think this was a very solid movie. So yeah, those are my recommendations. And now, importantly, and maybe divisively,
this is the big question. Yeah.
The big one. Same order. What movie would you have voted? Same order. It's always the same order. Yeah, the pressure's on, Jake. You gotta make the choice. Which movie would you have voted Best Picture for?
I know that I'm going to be painted as some kind of like small-minded village person, moron, not cinephile, but I think the Academy got it right this year. I loved How Green Was My Valley. It did everything I want a movie to do for me. Made me feel something, made me think, transported me to another world. It was 2 hours. It was an escape for 2 hours for me. And I understand how important Citizen Kane is. And I think it is so well executed. The performance from Orson Welles is so strong. It's just, there's something missing. I think we put into words when we talked about it before pretty well what that is for me, but it just doesn't get over the line for me for that reason. So I really love How Green Was My Valley.
Sure.
I'm going to give the Oscar to Citizen Kane, but I see why How Green Was My Valley got picked. Citizen Kane feels like it's a movie that like descended into 1940 or 41 from like 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
So I think just as a modern viewer, it's really difficult for me not to go like, that is a movie that is influencing how we make movies still today. So I think it's hard for me to imagine. I mean, I know that we knew that the reception to the movie was incredibly divided, but it's crazy to me to imagine seeing that movie in 1940 and what they're doing with how they're making that movie and not having your head, like the top of your head blown off.
Yeah.
But I see why the Academy gave it to How Green Was My Valley. It's speaking to a lot of the themes that are clearly resonating with Americans of the period, given like we know Sergeant York was the most popular movie of the time. It's kind of like a lot of these really saccharine home life family bullshit dramas that we've watched, but actually made sensitively and thoughtfully and with a beautiful picture, right? So it's kind of all of those inclinations, but actually done competently. So I completely understand why it got picked, but for me, it's Citizen Kane.
Fair, very fair.
Yeah, like I said, I think How Green Was My Valley is like the best iteration of that type of movie that we've seen. I also would give it to Citizen Kane because to me, just the whole experience of watching this movie, both from what they were doing with cinematography and like I mentioned, sound design, like I was going crazy over the sound design.
Oh, it's so good.
And it was just like such a good, I wish I didn't know what Rosebud was, so that at least I could be part of the like, so who is this, a person? Is this whatever? If I were fully going in blind, I feel like I would have even loved the movie more. But yeah, so Citizen Kane for sure. And so this one, I feel at least a little bit more confident, like I can reclaim the cinephile badge for saying the Academy got it wrong, along with whatever historians, because last year it still haunts me at night when I'm like, man, can't believe I gave it to Rebecca over The Great Dictator. But it's still, I think this is why they split best comedies and stuff, because it's just drama. When drama really works and moves you, it is hard to beat that, right? But yeah, so I would have given it to Citizen Kane this year, but I wouldn't be mad. Like if I were in the audience, I wouldn't be mad if How Green Was My Valley won. That's like the only one that I could be like, okay, yeah, that would be.
Yeah,
like
I don't
second.
think any of the others
movies,
are
I would
in
have been
contention
pissed.
this year.
Yeah, even if like Little Foxes won, I think I still would have been pissed because it would have been like, I've seen this movie from William Wyler 1,000 times.
Yeah, so those are the only two that I would accept as answers for this.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement, and I basically agree with everything you guys are saying. It's very. I'm taking a personal decision this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just what movie like is your shit personally.
And
like I know that's how I voted last time. How I landed on
sure.
Rebecca.
Yeah, me too. With
like,
Rebecca,
this is
even
my
though I'm
shit.
just like, damn.
And I keep hitting on it as a theme I'm watching, but that destruction of traditional rural lifestyles in the cobbling together of modernity. I'm seeing it so much, and I think it's so interesting in these films, and it happens in How Green Is My Valley too. So I like that.
I think part of it for me is that in that kind of setting and theme, I can't get rid of the small part of my brain that is like, for women, this was a different experience a lot of the time, and so even when those things are kind of propped up and community and family is very, very important, I think back to like, okay, that isn't really fair to everyone. So I don't always like take to it well.
And that's very fair.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful movie. There are pros and cons to everything, All right. Man, okay, so next episode, we're looking at the 15th Academy Awards, which also means we're somehow going to be rolling around to our next top 5.
That's
which
crazy.
Feels
How did that happen?
It's kind of crazy. I know. I'm just like, what? Okay, I'm going to have to
movies
think
have we even watched?
my list.
I know mine's going to be shaken up quite a bit.
Okay, perfect. But looking at the 15th Academy Awards for next year, the nominees are 49th Parallel, King's Row, The Magnificent Ambersons, The Pied Piper, The Pride of the Yankees, Random Harvest, The Talk of the Town, Wake Island, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and the winner, Mrs. Miniver. I've heard of zero of these movies. I was about to say the same thing.
I've heard of The Magnificent Ambersons, not for good reasons.
Oh, guys.
Okay.
At least this year there were some some big ones. Now I have no idea what any of this.
Yeah, The Magnificent Ambersons is the one that I briefly mentioned when we were talking about Citizen Kane. It's an Orson Welles picture that he didn't get to edit.
Oh, no. Ooh. So that'll be an interesting juxtaposition a year later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will at least say that actor-wise, but even though we had that whole conversation about maybe not always expecting great performances out of some of our favorites, but James Cagney and Ronald Colman are both in movies this
Ronald,
year. So
we haven't seen him in a while.
That's at least something. Yeah. So
I'm afraid of that Yankee Doodle. There's two Yankee. What the
I know. Me too. But that's the one that James Cagney is in, though, and I've always really liked him. So hopefully it's not what it sounds like.
Yankee Doodle Dandy and The Pride of the Yankees. Both of these are like.
Ooh.
We're at war. We're at war, folks.
We're at war. We're at war. Officially, America has entered the war when all of these movies have been released. So
be proud of your country. Treats you ladies so well.
Treats everyone so well. No differences between how it treats any of its citizens. Please join us next time and find out if that is true or not.
Spoiler, it's not.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Goodbye.